Oh, usually first day of school bell, you're not really that stoked. But we've been off for a couple weeks. Not that you guys have noticed because we've been keeping episodes coming out. But, ooh, back to school. I like it.
Seeing all your old friends again that you hadn't seen all summer. You're getting caught up on your escapades. And then all of a sudden the teacher walks to the board. The first thing that you're getting coming back is the Alamo.
Mm-hmm.
In taking that time off, we kind of... It sounds maybe nice to say that we had some time in not studying things. Mm-hmm. But after a while, when it becomes your routine and you get off of it, you kind of start itching for some stuff.
Yeah.
And we didn't quite come to the Alamo first, but when we locked into the Alamo, we had to look, is this an episode that we can do separate of the Texas Revolution? Obviously, this kind of plays a part in it. This is kind of the big barrel of TNT that stokes the fires under the revolutionists, under the Texians.
This is I'm trying to think of, this is the Pearl Harbor of the Texas Revolution.
Sort of.
It's that point where it, not as in like aspect of like.
Nobody got snuck up on in this one.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Not in that respect. What I mean was how much it like rallied everybody. But then at the same time, the version, especially in the States, that we learn on this, it's so just curated. As you probably know, if you listened to this podcast before, I mean, when we go in on things, even stuff within the United States, I actually think we're probably a little bit more critical of that shit.
Because it's what we learned about, and the stuff just didn't jive with what the actual story is.
There's a resentment about feeling misled, I think, when we learn about this stuff in school, where when you break it down, the Alamo itself, the Battle of the Alamo and what happened there, in American history, it's built up to be this whole thing about, Texas trying to go ahead and fight for their independence and everything like that. But then when you actually look at what occurred, you're just like, what the fuck were they doing even in that area?
How come they got there? What?
And if you were to plug any other two countries that weren't the United States in, for the listeners that are here in the States, if we were to be talking about this as if it took place between France and Spain, France and Germany or something like that, plug in those two countries and you'd be looking at the country that ended up using this as a motivational device. You'd be like, they fucking shouldn't have even been there.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to tell this as true as we can. And we're going to, try to hold any bias out of it. I'm sure if you are a Texas listener that this is almost gospel to you. We're not trying to attack Texas by any means for any of this stuff. The stories, frankly, that we've heard researching, some of them are pretty ridiculous. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there's a true version of this, and that's the way that we're going to go. It might not sound like everybody else's, but some people put more emphasis on some things.
I think I can look at this, and I'm going to really try to keep this mind frame. I'm going to look at this as the sacrifice of people who did something that they believed in.
Yeah.
Or for the most part that they believed. I'm going to try to view it from that standpoint. And it's just, well, let's just get into it.
All right.
Before we start the episode, remember, everybody, rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, that top rating. Keep the comments coming and everything. We've been snagging ideas for future episodes out of there, so you never know when yours might pop up.
Mm-hmm.
You ready to get... Oh, what were you going to say?
Let's try to remember all the study we did on the Alamo.
Okay. Okay, so let's explain where the Alamo was, what it originally was, and why that location has some significance in regards to the Texas Revolution.
Yeah, it's the move north. Spain comes over, obviously. They completely wreck Mexico, South America, do all that kind of stuff. They're pushing up into North America. what would become the United States, California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, everything on this west coast. Eventually, they're stretched up basically all the way to the Canada border. They've got the Pacific Northwest even up in there. And those areas aren't as populated because you still have this Spanish concentration down in Central America and South America. They haven't pushed up north yet.
Well, and especially when you think about people coming over, they're not sending people over around the Cape Horn or Africa and everything. You're sending people, and again, we always look at when you see those maps of Africa and Europe and everything like that close to South America, you're like, damn, that's actually pretty close. So Spain is just, they have that voyage nailed down. They could do it in their sleep. So that's where everyone's coming in. At the very furthest point, it's going to be somewhere in the, the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, I'm sure after dealing with the Aztecs, the Mexican people, and moving up north, you're dealing with kind of concentrated areas of people. But then as you're moving up into the Texas area in Arizona, you start to deal with these bands of Native Americans that don't fight the same way. These people are very nomadic. They are very brutal when it comes to dealing with any kind of invaders. And so you're probably not going to want to try to populate the area that you have to continuously fight, basically a guerrilla war.
Given enough
with
time,
these natives.
given enough time, you'll spread up there.
Yeah.
Eventually, when you get enough people to keep the populous cities, populated. But they haven't had that time yet. And frankly, they're still spreading out throughout Mexico to where they still have plenty of room down there.
Yeah.
So there's not really a requirement to get too far away from that centralized location.
Well, in their mind, they have nothing but time. They just think that this is going to be the status quo, that they're always going to be on top in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
In 1716, you get the Spanish government that starts to establish several Catholic missions.
Catholic missions.
Catholic missions. In East Texas, and they're trying to spread the word of God to all these heathen natives. Basically, what they're trying to do is they want to convert them, but I think at the same time, they just want to be like, God damn it, quit firing arrows at us when we get close.
So we're going to refer geographically so people know where we're talking about to the locations of these places, probably primarily in Texas. But at this time, Texas isn't a thing. I want to say that Texas was Coahuila y Tejas.
It was kind of, I think it was two provinces that were lumped next together, because I think Coahuila or whatever it was kind of like the Arizona, West Texas area.
Okay.
It was Tejas.
Yeah.
That's where we can call it. Tejas, I believe is the way that they did it. So as they're headed up to this kind of East Texas area, as Chris was talking about, this Tejas, they start building these small kind of mud and straw structures, and they were smart, because what do you always need to survive in a place like that?
Water.
You always got to find water. So you start putting them at the mouth of these rivers. This first structure that they had laid down was a mile north, or was kind of near the headwaters of the San Antonio River. It would be named after St. Anthony Padua, I think his name was. And then a mile north of the mission, they're looking around, they're like, ooh, this could be a pretty decent area up here. Maybe we build a fort. They end up building this fort. They give this new governor of Spanish Texas, his name was Martin de Alacron, basically the keys to the fort. He's like, name it what you want to name it. He names it Presidio San Antonio de Bejar. Presidio is basically like stronghold. And that's where modern day San Antonio was founded.
And that's to keep people from coming south.
Yeah.
That's to essentially defend themselves from people coming south. They're like, yeah, these weird guys that like cheese and wine have actually been hanging out in the area. So keep an eye on them. Let them know this is our area.
Yeah, there's a lot of pinkies up on the teacups. We got to keep an eye on these fellas. They realize that this St. Anthony of Padua, this first kind of mud and straw structure that they built near San Antonio, was in a very flood-prone area at the headwaters of the San Antonio River.
Oh, shit, it rises.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like, okay, that's fine. Just bring it on into town. So the mission ends up getting moved into the city. The complex would grow to about 3 acres at that point in time. I think at its max, it was like 5 acres of land, which when you look at the Alamo now, you're like, 5 acres?
So 3 acres as far as the area within protected walls is, I think, how they considered it. The layout, like Adam was saying, does go ahead and change over time. We'll go into a little bit of detail what the layout actually is at the time of the Battle of the Alamo, but we'll hit that here in just a few minutes.
Yeah. Just over time, they are basically reinforcing this area because they're getting attacks from Comanche and Apache raiders that have now seen that the Spanish have wanted to set down roots. We're going to go check out what's going on over there.
That part comes into play in a very important way because the way the fort is constructed, you're only going to, especially if your resources are a little bit more scarce, you're only going to kind of build it to protect what it's currently being attacked with. So Comanche raids, things like that, you're building it to basically hold off people that are firing at you with rifles, bows and arrows, things like that. And then you want the walls high enough that they're not able to scale them very easy. It means that you don't have to build them as strong as you would if you were, say, taking cannon fire or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. During the Mexican War for Independence, the mission actually served as a political prison, and then it was San Antonio's first hospital, political prison for the Spanish fighting the Mexicans that are being imprisoned inside of this fort. The early 19th century saw the mission gain the name the Alamo. Alamo, I believe, it's Cottonwood, I think is the translation. The soldiers that were stationed at the Alamo during this point in time were like, this place looks a lot like home. There's cottonwoods everywhere. Let's just call it the Alamo. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets its name. July 4th, 1803, big day in history, maybe the greatest purchase ever, arguably right up there with Alaska. Probably Alaska more important because of all the oil that we suck out of there. But then again, I guess Louisiana Purchase, we get a shitload of farmland. So does the ag maybe outweigh the oil? I guess they kind of work in harmony a little bit.
But you don't know about the oil at that point.
True. Very true.
It's not even, you have no idea.
Yeah, so Louisiana Purchase, July 4th, 1803. The United States purchases all of the Louisiana territory, and it kind of starts to create this neighborly situation with the U.S. and Spain that Spain may not have been super pumped about.
So it goes, U.S. independence, 1783, that's when it was official. It's not 1776, that's when it kicked off. 1783.
We wrote the check in 1776.
Yeah, exactly. Louisiana Purchase, 1803. Mexico gains its independence from the Spanish in 1821, August 24th, 1821. So there's some time frame there where we have acquired the Louisiana territory. So our border is currently with Spanish Mexico, and then it shares a border after the War of Mexican Independence directly with Mexico itself. And that border, I think, looking at the map, it covers most of Texas, and like 90% of Texas going up. So you're only really getting a section of the part that stretches furthest to the kind of northeast, and then the very top of like the little handle. So the rest of that is all property of essentially Mexico.
And Louisiana Purchase becomes an issue because when the French first ceded the Louisiana territory over to the Spanish, they never put any distinguishing markers between what was Louisiana territory and what was the Spanish land.
Yeah, we were talking about this. There had to be some type of like geographical feature, or else you wouldn't know like what the hell you were doing. There had to be a river up there, a mountain range. It could have even been like, because you're getting onto the Great Plains at that point, it could have been maybe where the mountain ranges stop. But I would imagine there's got to be some. You just have Spanish and French guys yelling at each other, being like, "Hey, this is our land."
I mean, how many French people were over there? Like, it wasn't like it was a French Mecca that was pushing over into the Spanish.
Yeah.
So once the Spanish cede that back to France, they don't make any delineations again. Once Napoleon goes ahead and sells that to the United States, he kind of gives a rough outline. Well, as we're pushing in and exploring Louisiana territory, they start pushing east further. Like, hey, maybe let's see, how much land did we get? Let's just go till somebody stops us.
Napoleon and his guy are sitting there, and the conversation is like, was the negotiation wasn't with Thomas Jefferson. TJ came over later, and he got the credit for it, but it was really, what was his name?
Two guys.
But one of the guys was like, signed the Declaration of Independence. I feel bad for forgetting this guy's name. Anyway, they're sitting there negotiating, and they're like, how much land did you say it was? And he's like, it's this amount. He's like, can you draw us on the map where it's at? And they get to that point where they have to start delineating between Spanish territory and French territory. And the guy just keeps edging the pencil into Spanish Tory, and he's like, yeah, you like that? Okay, that's how big it is.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. It looks like a good drawing. And the Americans finally, when they get a little bit of pushback, when the U.S. citizens, we're all Americans, for this episode, we're just going to call the white folks in the United States the Americans. It's going to make stuff a lot cleaner.
But we have to stress that. Okay. No, because I was like kind of trying to parse this out in my head this week. The Texas Revolution was not the Republic of Texas or the United States attempting to take Texas as part of United States territory. The Texas Revolution was a group of people that wanted to be independent from the United States because this was their goal, was the Republic of Texas, by taking a chunk of Mexican land. That's what it is. If you have to boil it down to a nutshell, what the Texas Revolution is they weren't going to be Americans. I mean, Americans in the term of like North America, but they were not going to consider themselves
U.S. citizens.
U.S. citizens. They would be Republic of Texas citizens.
They'd be Texans.
Yeah.
Which stuck around.
We still hear about it. Yeah,
Well,
they still like to point that out.
And at the same time, the irony of this is most of the U.S. citizens that created the Republic of Texas actually became Mexican in order to gain the land that they had
Some
in
of the
Texas.
most famous ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
A couple of the most famous ones. So these incursions by the U.S. citizens into Mexican territory finally get a little pushback from Spain saying, hey, you guys have gone far enough. You bought Louisiana territory. You didn't buy any Spanish land.
Mm-hmm.
We got to stop this. And the Americans...
Whoa. Where are you going, white man?
Yeah. Slower rolls.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. government's kind of looking at this like, well, we're not satisfied because we haven't made it to where we want to be.
Do you see what the French man drew on the map? He told us that was our territory. I don't know what to fucking tell you, man.
Yeah. So they start kind of pushing down further and further. There is kind of this expeditionary group, whatever you want to call it. As they push down into Mexico, they basically created this thing called the Green Flag Republic. And it was them trying to, basically it was a soft push towards this revolution. At the same time, these weren't Mexican citizens yet. These were still U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And that revolt was shut down pretty quick by Spain. They're trying to figure out what they need to do. 1819, we run into something called the Adams-Onis Treaty, or Unis Treaty. And that's what actually cedes Florida to the United States. It also defines the border of New Spain and the United States, making that solid on the Spanish Texas, rest of the United States side. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, they also give us the Pacific Northwest. We get Washington and Oregon and everything up in there that was formerly Spanish territory. I'm sure maybe 10 Spaniards had been there at that point in time and maybe planted some flags.
Hope you motherfuckers like rain and trees.
And Bigfoots, yeah. Mm-hmm. Or Bigfoot. Because that's pretty much all you're getting up there. But the United States is like, well, Lewis and Clark, check this stuff out. We'll see what goes on. We like the area. Yeah, we'll take that in the deal.
It gives us a corridor to the Pacific Ocean.
A safer corridor than what they had to face. And at the same time, Spain's like, we got this. Nobody from the United States is going to break in anymore. We don't have to deal with this. Unfortunately, the enemy from within has already started knocking at the door.
The call is coming from inside the house.
The Mexican War of Independence, I believe, kicks off in like 1811. Probably gets paused a little bit for the War of 1812 and everything that's going on. After that, we end up, what'd you say earlier? Mexico ends up gaining its independence in 1821.
August 24th, 1821. Pew, pew, pew.
Very cool. And they move pretty quick. But also, it really helps when you have a neighbor that just kind of went through this. Unfortunately, when the Spanish end up giving the Mexicans independence, they say, well, let's run this kind of...
feels like Mexico kind of took it.
Yeah.
We got to give props. I mean, we took our independence here in the States. We got to give it where it's due.
No, I'm not pushing back against it. I truly believe it.
Snatching that ship from Europe.
At the same time, there was so much Spanish influence, and there had been so many generations of people that lived there for like 300 plus years, that when it comes time, they're like, okay, well, why don't we just create like this first Mexican empire? And it turns out that the empire is actually run by all of the Spanish families that had then moved over and basically pushed themselves into this kind of Mexican culture.
Like, hey, we're living like kings over here. We should probably stop listening to the other king.
Yeah.
We don't want to listen to them anymore.
And there's a young Spanish military officer who's going to play a small role in this whole thing named Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. And he was actually in charge of a garrison down in Veracruz. Well, when we get the switch over and we get this first Mexican empire that shows up, de Santa Anna goes ahead and flips himself over into more of a federalist view, doesn't want an empire at this point in time. And
you can never want that at first. You can never show your hand that early.
Yeah, not at all. You got to run a little diversionary tactic. And basically, Santa Anna plays a major role in the Mexicans overthrowing this Mexican empire.
Spanish Empire.
Or Spanish Empire. Well, the first Mexican empire run by the Spanish still.
Yeah, okay.
They declared that they're a federal republic in 1823, and they drafted a constitution in 1824. The constitution that they drafted in 1824 actually makes them the United States of Mexico because it was so closely aligned with the Constitution of the United States. Mm-hmm. They just had to tweak a few things, kind of make it their own, but they had this kind of perfect outline that they could throw in for their Constitution. Yeah. And you have the United States of Mexico in 1824, which kind of changes everything because you're trying to get your footing. You're trying to get your footing as a country. There's no more Spanish oversight. You are your own people. You fought for this independence, and now you need to grow it. Mexican Texas, meanwhile, is just being blown to hell. Any Mexicans that are coming up into Texas have to fight these Apaches and these Comanches that we're dealing with before. They want to kind of control that land a little bit. So what they do is instead of being angry at the white men, at the United States citizens for coming over the border, they're like, hey, we can make some money off you guys. We can maybe start to sell you some land. And this whole process...
Hey, you guys seem like you're good at killing Indians, is kind of what it came down to. So this kind of allows them... Basically, this is inviting the vampire in the house. They bring him in. They say, we'll go ahead and give you some breaks as far as how you guys want to do things. You can help develop this land. But the biggest kicker is that you also kind of have to help defend the land because it's going to be... You're going to be using it essentially from us. And then that allows us to then kind of start moving into that area as well because it's going to be more appealing because it'll be safer.
Well, this impresario program that they come up with is actually fairly brilliant. It actually starts out in 1821, so they kicked it off even before they got the Republic started. What it was is an impresario was basically a land agent who was contracted through Mexico to bring settlers into Texas. In order to become a landowner in Texas, you would have to become a citizen. To become a citizen of Texas, you had to practice Catholicism and you had to learn Spanish. Not a tough gambit to run.
Spanish is kind of hard to learn.
It is, but at the same time...
You're getting land.
You got to throw a couple Hail Marys up, maybe stop by the...
We saw what people will do for land in the Dust Bowl and what they'll put up with. If you just have to convert Catholicism and learn Spanish, yeah.
So this deal that they got after they became citizens and these impresarios were selling them these land... Settlers could claim 4,438 acres of land in Texas for $40. Didn't have to put any money down when they signed the contract.
It seems like such an arbitrary number.
They said, one of the documentaries said that amount of land in the United States at that point in time would cost like $5,000.
Okay.
I mean, that's $5,000.
A huge amount of money at that time.
Yeah, it's a massive amount of money. But again, 4,438 acres, that's a shitload of land to be able to do whatever you want with it.
How are you even going to be keeping tabs on all that?
Yeah, but at the same time, if it's your land, you're expected to keep the natives away from your stuff.
Okay, so you're responsible for patrolling 4,000 plus, almost 4,500 acres of land. How often do you think they were like, listen, just make up a fucking number, tell them how much land they're going to get, and then we'll literally just separate them by like 3 miles, and they'll never fucking run into each other.
Yeah. You think they're going to go out and count all the 4,500, 4,000 acres?
Oh, no, yours
land?
actually is narrow, but it goes way back.
Goes on forever. These impresarios had a pretty sweet deal because for every 300 settlers that they would bring down to Mexico, they would be granted 20,000 acres of land. Free of charge. Stephen F. Austin, guy who's fairly important in the Texas Revolution, ends up coming down there with his father. His father would then pass away. Stephen F. Austin kept up this impresario business. He would claim 60,000 acres of land for himself. He started his own community down there. He had
So we got
much
900
land.
settlers to come in.
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good deal. Most of these settlers came from the southern United States. And of course, at that point in time, if you're coming from the southern United States, you're bringing slavery down into Texas. In 1829, slavery is actually banned in Mexico by this, he was a president, Vicente Guerrero. And trying to keep the Texas settlers from revolt, Stephen F. Austin comes down there and he says, hey, I believe they were actually in Mexico City, where they met. And Austin says, the slavery thing's kind of a non-starter. One of the other things that you told us were we weren't going to have to pay any taxes on anything as long as we sold our cotton, whatever our stuff was to you guys. We like the no taxes thing. Let's keep up the no taxes. But at the same time, slavery is just kind of ingrained in what we do. You gave us 4,000 acres. You don't think that we're going to bring slaves to work this 4,000 acres? Mm-hmm. You don't think that I'm going to get out and bust my back to do all this? I need to maximize my stuff. So I'm going to bring some people that we don't actually consider people from the South, and we're going to bring them into your country. Is that cool?
To them, it was bringing fucking farm equipment.
Yeah. And I'm sure Guerrero was like, well, we just outlawed slavery. He's like, would you rather let us keep slavery, or would you rather us all be pissed off?
We're getting rid of this bullshit. And then instead of being like, yeah, everyone's getting rid of this bullshit, then we have to just basically have you up there in this section of Mexico being like, oh, no, we're still doing that here. People still aren't, all people aren't people up here.
Yeah. At the same time, for Mexico, though, they're getting a lot of agriculture out of that region.
Yeah.
It's a tough juxtaposition to be in. But you're trying to do something for human rights, but at the same time, you need some money because you just started a country.
Monetary, yeah. And at that point, morals were not the priority.
No, and there's really, from my point of view, there's not a whole lot of morality in this whole story. But he ends up getting these exemptions issued for Texas. They're keeping the tax-free status that they have. They're also keeping slavery. As we talked about earlier, Santa Anna had switched over to the Mexican side. He wasn't a general, but he was pretty high up in the military for the Mexicans. Santa Anna would lead a rebellion against this guy named Anastasio Bustamante. And Bustamante was actually the vice president at the time for Guerrero in 1832. He had actually led a coup against Guerrero, knocked Guerrero out. And Santa Anna, I believe, had control of the ports. Maybe it was still in Veracruz. And basically was like, we're taking you out, man.
Yeah.
We have this port city. We're going to move inwards. This bloody rebellion happens. And it was enough to force a full cabinet resignation, Bustamante to step down, and them to basically declare new elections for 1833. Guy just led a beautiful bloody rebellion to knock out the guy that just led a coup against Guerrero.
Put him in office.
Got to put him in office. So April 1st, 1833, April Fool's Day. Very funny. I wonder if that's their normal date for elections now.
I don't think they have an April Fool's Day.
You don't think there's that down there?
Nope.
Santa Anna gets elected, but he has so little interest in the job that he just tells his VP, have at it. I'll take the title. I like the title. The title sounds cool. Don't really want to do a lot of the work. Eventually it turns into a situation where Santa Anna starts to drift away from this federalist view into more this centralized government view. And a lot of it was because Bustamante, through his coup, ended up just basically spending all the money in the bank. He left him with basically nothing. I'm sure during this rebellion, he was probably trying to steal a lot and filter a lot out.
Who did that in Cuba? When Castro took over, the dude that fled to Miami with like the entire
$300 million.
Yeah.
His name's escaping me, but yeah, just another probably similar situation. As Santa Anna starts to believe in this more centralized government, he goes ahead and he tells his VP to step aside. He actually wants to try ruling the country, and he basically takes over in this dictatorial fashion. In 1935, he replaces the 1824 Constitution with the Siete Leyes. which was
seven rules, seven laws.
7 laws. I'd love to read them to you. I read them and they just made shit for sense to me. But basically, this 1824 Constitution, this beautifully crafted document that everybody was cool with, was done away for these 7 rules, these 7 laws. And that pretty much gets everybody in Mexico fired up. This wasn't just a rebellion that happened in Mexican Texas. Everybody was pretty angry about all this kind of stuff.
There is this thing, basically, it's called the Mexican Federalist War, and that starts in 1835. The Texas Revolution kind of almost piggybacks. It's like a conflict that's going on within more of the interior of Mexico. And then at the same time, I think the people up in Tejas, in that area, which they refer to them both the people that were there from Mexico that lived in the area and then the people that had immigrated in, most of them illegally. There's going to be part of the entire theme of this thing is that a ton of the people by 1836 that are in the total non-native population was like 38,500. It was somewhere around that amount. 5,000 of those were enslaved persons. Most of the people there were there illegally. So they were there in Mexico illegally. So I think what happened is the Texicans is what, or not Texians, sorry. Texians is what they referred to, the people that came in and immigrated illegally, and then also the people from Mexico that were in that area. So the Texians kind of piggybacked on this Mexican Federalist War because Santa Anna was also having to put out fires within like the western part of the country and some other areas.
And then you also had kind of a lesser mentioned group, the Tejanos, that were actually the Mexicans that were born in Texas, that were right there alongside these Texians. You can say that the revolution was probably starting to get a little riled up once this Constitution was repealed and these 7 laws were put in. It probably started a little earlier than that. April 6th, 1830. Was I believe it's called like the Bill of April 6th, the immigration bill. But it basically stopped this legal flow of U.S. settlers into Texas. And that's kind of a big deal. But again, we're talking 5 years before that. It stopped the immigration. Part of the reason it stopped the immigration was because everything that came in with the impresarios, that was one person that bought land. That one person that bought land might be bringing 4 or 5 other people that are his family, slaves, what have you, anything like that into the country. Yeah. So you have one legal resident, and then you have 5 illegal people coming in.
Plus all of the other people they brought in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mexico is starting to look at that like, well, shit, these guys are kind of calling the shots. They push down the whole slavery thing. They don't want taxes, and now they're loading up with people. The threat that they made about slavery was a rebellion. We probably want to stop as many of them coming in as possible if they're going to start a rebellion.
Santa Anna was basically at that point, once he was establishing that more centralist dictatorial type system and everything, at that point he was just like, no. As the sole leader of this country, I don't have to negotiate and say, oh, yeah, you guys can keep getting the tax breaks or whatever, and you can go ahead and keep slavery. The country's not doing that. And if you're in the country, you're not doing that either. And of course, everyone that, all these Texians and everything were just like, well, if we can't have slaves, I guess we're just going to fight for the land.
Now we have to pay taxes. We're largely independent up here. We tell you that we don't get a whole lot from the Mexican government. So just let us be us. We don't want to pay taxes.
You guys haven't even attempted to assimilate. None of you are Catholics, basically.
No.
And none of you speak Spanish. And that was part of the whole deal with you guys coming down and being citizens.
Yeah, in order to get the land that you're then prospering on. Which, again, is another tough line to draw, because if they're prospering on it and they're selling their goods to Mexico, Mexico's also prospering at the same time, because then they're sending it out everywhere else. But they're prospering.
I understand that's land is being worked, but it's still their land.
Yeah.
They're entitled to that. That's like if something gets produced here in the United States, like, oh, and we didn't get any of the money from that, everyone would be fucking screaming to the hills.
It's just a very untenable situation. And again, we're not on Santa Anna's side.
There's no good people in this. Like, I know people are going to be like, well, what about the heroes of the Alamo? These are people that maybe you don't understand what reasons they were actually fighting for. You can be fighting for independence from somebody. It doesn't mean you're the good guys.
Yeah.
You're just fighting for your own self-serving independent interests. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, and once you try to declare Texas a republic, you're pulling yourself out of that country.
I also think we have this weird thing with the term fighting, or the term fighting for independence is the assumption for us is because we fought for our own independence, we always viewed ourselves as the good guy. So when people say in other countries we're fighting for our independence, there's a certain recognition or kinship there and being like, oh, obviously if they're fighting for their independence, the other people on the other side have got to be assholes, just like the British were assholes to us.
Yeah.
So looking back on that, when, these guys in, Tejas are fighting for their independence, again, they're fighting for independence for themselves. They're not even fighting for independence to take it for the United States. It's for them, their own self-serving interests.
Yeah, it's just everybody kind of in their general area. It also kind of rubs me a certain way to think 1804, Louisiana Purchase, 1835, we're starting the rebellion. You guys have been in Mexico for less than a half a century, and you're already talking about independence. We were here a lot longer underneath British rule before we finally pushed back.
Like 3 decades, less than half a century.
Yeah, not a lot of history to that. Once this whole thing gets kicked off, it really kind of starts to move quick. October 2nd, 1835, you had the Battle of Gonzales. There was 100 Mexican cavalry that were sent into Gonzales. Basically, sounds so stupid, to get a cannon back that was lent to the settlers in 1831. Now, they wanted this cannon back because, as a dictator, the most important thing is making sure that people can't fight back against you. Mm-hmm. So if you have any governmental arms that you've lent out to people that may want to fight against you, you probably want to get that shit back. You want to centralize all the weaponry.
You're not going to arm your would-be or, future opponents.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they gave it to them in 1831 for the people of Gonzales to fight against these Native American raids that are coming at them. 1835, they come back. The orders that I've heard that were given to these Mexican cavalry were basically don't push too hard. Like, let's not start something about this one cannon if you can help it.
I kind of think, like, you're providing one cannon to this area to protect against, Comanche raids, things like that. These things are not quick to reload. Oh. We'll touch on it here in a little bit, but because it's going to come into play with the amount of people that are actually defending the Alamo. But they set an order for these cannons to be decently operational. For some of these things, you had to have groups of 5 or 6 guys, and then the larger cannons required even more people.
And it takes a matter of minutes to reload these things.
Yeah. And to move them is, this huge thing because they're just on these wooden wheels and they're fucking solid. Aren't they solid cast iron?
Yeah, so you need draft animals basically to pull these things around.
So what I'm getting at here is when there's a Comanche raid, they're coming in on horses, firing rifles, bows and arrows, things like that. You're just giving out a cannon because it makes a big, loud boom. It's fireworks. It probably scares the shit out of them and scares them off, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotta be. I mean, maybe you get lucky and try to fire one up Main Street and hit a horse, and then that spooks everybody else.
So not even super effective against an actual legitimate Comanche attack, but Santa Anna looking at that situation and being like, they could turn that around and actually use that against the kind of warfare that we would wage.
Yeah, maybe if we lent out a couple other ones and they get them all together, fighting 3 cannons is not going to be great for us. So as this group of cavalry end up showing up on Gonzales, they say, hey, we're here for the cannon. And then all of a sudden this militia runs a flag up the pole.
What cannon? I don't know. The one underneath the stack of hay bales over there. No, there's nothing underneath those. You didn't even move it from the firing position. You just stacked up the hay bales on top of the wall. Well, yeah, it's really heavy.
Why is there a stack of cannonballs next to that hay? What are you guys doing up there? The militia rolls up this flag that has a flag on it. I'm sure this was a hand sewn. I'd love to see the real one. And it had the words "Come and take it" written on the flag. Now, this might be a bit of a problem because if the Mexicans don't speak English, they might not know what "come and take it" means. So the flag probably doesn't mean a whole lot to them.
Come? Take?
As the militia starts to get a little antsy seeing this cavalry roll up, and again, the Mexican cavalry is nothing to mess with. The Mexican cavalry was trained by the Spanish cavalry, and as we know from a lot of episodes, in the Iberian Peninsula, people on horses are very dangerous. Mm-hmm. They are very, very good riders. They know how to handle weapons up there,
Well, they're war
lances.
horses that are trained essentially to like ignore shit and to like charge into people, like to be using the horse as a weapon itself.
Yeah, so you get some soldiers roll up on you. We'll talk about their rifles later and their propensity to not fire them straight and have shitty gunpowder and all that kind of stuff. But if the cavalry rolls up, something serious is going on. And the militia responds to the cavalry rolling up by firing on the cavalry, who immediately end up retreating. There would be kind of like a little nighttime skirmish. But when I say nighttime skirmish, these are the Mexican soldiers. The Mexican cavalry was basically told, like, don't make this a bigger deal than it has to be. And to point out how little of a deal this was.
If you can get the cannon out of there, get it out, but don't start like a war.
Yeah, let's not start World War One at that point, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know how you would want to consider that.
Let's just not start a war. It ends up being that there were 2 Mexican cavalry killed. There was 1 injured. And the only militiaman injured, I believe, had a broken nose from the kick of his gun that hit himself in the face, I think is how
Sounds
that all
about
went
right.
down. But at the same time, the settlers, the Texians, are like, we ran off 100 cavalry. We won this war. Not at all thinking that this was like 100 people against 200 people.
We only had 1 cannon,
Yeah, we did some good here.
and it took us like 15 minutes to get all the hay off of it.
So they're riding pretty high after this victory. And once they see the retreat of the cavalry, they're thinking, well, we got them on the run. Why don't we start following them? The Texians decide to try and follow them back to where they were headed, which was San Antonio de Bejar. October 12th through December 11th, 1835, there were approximately 600 Texians. And when I say 600 Texians, there's 600 people fighting on the Texian side. They are made up of an amalgamation of actual Texians and then a bunch of loyalists, not loyalists, I would say maybe sympathetic figures from the United States.
People probably that were approached
Supporters.
when this was going to happen and were like, hey, come fight here and we'll give you some land or some shit.
Yeah, there was a militia group called the New Orleans Greys that actually came over from Louisiana into Texas to help the Texians fight. So this wasn't...
For some perks.
Yeah, but this wasn't just like a pure Texian push.
No. Well, this is also why Santa Anna was like, this has got to be the United States trying to hone in on this territory. 100%. They're doing this under the guise of these people fighting for, this Texas revolt and everything like that. But what is the other option? And Texas is like, well, we're actually going to do a Republic of Texas. We're not going to be part of the United States. Santa Anna's got to be like, that's bullshit. Like, look how many people are coming from the United States to fight here.
The Texians didn't wear uniforms, and I'm willing to bet the New Orleans Greys probably got their name from wearing gray uniforms.
Probably.
It would make sense to me that or their maybe gray skin. I don't know what it was. But this 600 force was led by Stephen F. Austin again. The clash would ensue inside of San Antonio de Bejar. Mexicans actually had a 2-to-1 advantage. They had 1,200 soldiers. They were commanded by a guy named, I love this dude's name, Martin Perfecto de Cos. He was actually the brother-in-law of Santa Anna, which becomes a bit of an issue because as this fight goes on, as this battle goes on, you end up seeing, I believe it was 150 killed and 750 Mexican prisoners taken, as opposed to 35 killed, wounded, or captured Texians.
Which is crazy because this is a place that's already been in the Mexican army's hands.
They should have the high ground, right?
It should be already defensible. So to walk in and be able to do that in a city that wasn't yours to like, that you didn't have a presence there or anything like that, I'd fucking tip of the cap to that.
Very impressive. Yeah. You're outnumbered 2-to-1.
I also can see 100% why after Gonzalez and then after this happening, it was like, oh, we're going to dog walk these guys.
Yeah.
We're just going to, independence for the Republic of Texas is in the bag.
How many more times can we do this? And I want to say that there were a couple other battles. We'll cover it in the Texas Revolution, but there were a couple other little skirmishes that they had won. I think it was like 5 in total, counting this, where they're living high on the hog.
They got a hot hand.
They can see the Republic coming. After the victory, most of the Texians split. I'm sure they had to go back to the United States and then go handle a few other things. They leave this guy named Colonel James C. Neal in charge as the acting commander of the Alamo.
They're a militia too. This is their part-time job.
Yeah, And there's kind of this interesting dynamic of there's an actual like Texian army, and then there's a volunteer army. For some reason, we didn't just combine these two things.
Well, and the whole thing with the Texian army is you're like, okay, how is there a Texian army? The plans for this Republic of Texas had been in the works for a little bit of time, trying to draft this kind of stuff up. And so there was already, I guess like a standing or at least a governmentally established military presence that was like what you consider like the regulars.
Yeah. And unfortunately for James C. Neal, who was the acting commander in the area, not the acting commander of this kind of provisional Texian army, the actual provisional government of the revolution was in shambles. They could not figure out anything. I mean, they're trying to start a republic. They're trying to build their own place. Meanwhile, trying to figure out how independence is going to work. But at the same time, if you declare independence, you want to have a structure in place.
Yeah.
So as they're arguing, trying to figure it out, they had a place, I believe they actually called it Washington too, but it was like another capital of the republic. It had an actual Mexican city name.
We're just flying by the seat of our pants on this. We'll figure it out later.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to get all their stuff figured out. So Neil writes to them basically to request provisions and more troops because while they did take the Alamo and while they did take the whole complex and while they did take San Antonio, they took a lot of stuff, but 600 guys, more than half of them end up splitting. I want to say there was like 50 or 60 of the Texian army that were still in the Alamo, basically.
So you push down south, you take the area, you're done fighting. The other army isn't attacking you. They've gone ahead and retreated. Everybody still has to go work their 9 to 5. So they're like, peace out. Some of the regular army probably stays down there. And that was the other thing too, is most of the people that were going to be part of like the Texian regulars that had come in and were coming into Texas they were coming in there illegally, of course, because it's not their country. But just think of it in the terms of without naming names. You just have people from a foreign country invading into another country in support of that country to try to fight for its independence to become a third country.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the third country in question that's trying to be built is sending messages back to the United States to be printed in papers talking about all of these victories that they're falling on left and right.
And encouraging people to come.
Yeah, to get more support. To start this fight over. Neil's request to the provisional government pretty much falls on deaf ears. At that point in time, he ends up trying to figure out who the fuck's in charge of this whole situation. There were 4 different men that claimed to command the Revolutionary Army. Like the Texian Army had 4 guys that were like, no, I was made in charge. One of them somehow isn't Stephen F. Austin. Like, he was told to go there, but by the time he showed up, these 3 other guys are fighting over who's controlling the troops. He's kind of the odd man out.
So I was kind of thinking about that. Like, you'd obviously going to give it to the guy who was so successful.
Yeah.
Given the option, you're Stephen F. Austin, okay? You're stone cold Stephen F. Austin. You end up doing this, and because you're so successful, you go meet with your provisional government back wherever, Washington 2 or whatever you want to call it. And they say, hey, you're very popular right now. Why don't you actually help us plan this because you've been so successful? You don't have to be a frontline commander anymore. You're taking that, right? Yeah. You don't have to go out and fight. I think that's kind of probably what happened.
It absolutely could be. I mean, he plays a massive role in the rest of the revolution. But at this point in time, he was kind of just chilling. He didn't have a whole lot to do. They were going to cycle through these other guys that had taken command and seen, we'll talk about a couple of them, not great commanders at all. Austin ends up getting this letter. He's like, I got no men. I got no supplies at my disposal. I'll tell you what, I'm going to send my Colonel Jim Bowie.
Okay, hold on. Before we start getting to the characters and everything.
We got a minute before that.
Okay. He needs help because they're at the southernmost point of the line. They're going to be one of the first places that get hit when Santa Anna, who now knows about this because they beat his brother-in-law, and he's probably known about the revolt kind of brewing and everything like that. So as soon as that happens, they're like, hey, we have the Alamo, we have Behar. Santa Anna's like, do ya? So he starts building up forces again. He's dealing with all these other, rebellions and everything, and assembles this group of basically it's new recruits and then also conscripts that I'm guessing he's getting from the area north of the capital or kind of in between where Teos and everything else is.
About 6,000 in total, which, again, for all of the wars that we've talked about, the troop numbers in this are truly astounding.
Just the low number?
Yeah, I mean, you're telling me that they have, it was what, like 200 people, 189 people inside the Alamo, and that constitutes...
A billion dead at Stalingrad. Yeah, it's an insane just juxtaposition of how small the skirmishes used to be.
189 people were like, how many people were dying an hour in Stalingrad?
Well, like, I don't know if we've talked about it, but was it the Battle of Flanders where they used the bows and arrows and everything?
I think so.
But that ended up being a small number. It was like 127 on one side and something like that on the other side. But he assembles this force and starts marching them north. And as they're traveling, they're like, don't worry about it. We're going to actually train these guys on the move. They keep wanting to shoot from their hips because they're afraid to get the guns up to their, shoulders. And frankly, most of them have never touched a rifle in their lives.
Well, they have kind of this interesting dynamic because, of course, England being the opportunists that they are, got a lot of guns left over. Got a lot of stuff going on back home. You got a surplus.
You know who we're still salty about?
Why don't we go ahead and send the Mexican army all of the rifles that we're not using right now? The gunpowder that they had apparently was a lot weaker than what I think the Texians had. So they would have to load this thing with so much gunpowder that if they held it up to their face to try to fire a ball, the black powder fire would come up and it would burn their faces, probably burn their little mustaches off, burn their big eyebrows. Basically, they had to hold them down at their hips to fire them. And your accuracy was something that I believe they were smoothbore rifles. So your accuracy with a smoothbore rifle is already going to be kind of suspect, even if you're looking down the barrel and sighting it in.
Yeah.
If you're holding it at your hip and firing it, you're just basically praying it goes
That's
straight.
what you do for a shotgun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's because it sprays, but you're just firing
Anyone
one
who's
little
played
ball.
a shooter video game, firing from the hip, it's like that MacGruber scene where he's just up in the air firing the Uzis. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll talk about Santa Anna's march because it's incredible. It's Hannibal-esque how fast they go.
Yeah, they go through some shit just getting to the Alamo.
Yeah. Jim Bowie ends up getting dispatched with 30 guys to go check out the Alamo. There's varying stories about how this goes. Supposedly, Bowie was supposed to show up. Stephen F. Austin basically said, fold the Alamo, destroy what you can, get all the munitions and everything like that, load them up, bring them back, we'll use them somewhere else. Maybe they're not going to care about San Antonio as much. Maybe if there's nothing there for them to try to reclaim, they'll just go ahead and pass it up, and we can use those resources somewhere else. So Bowie ends up showing up, and he starts looking around, and he's talking to Neil, and Neil is just gassing him up the whole time. He's like, look at this wall. Look at how we reinforce this. This is beautiful. We have this 18-pound cannon.
Look at this big, beautiful wall.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels between Santa Anna and that gentleman in this whole thing. But supposedly one version of the story was that Bowie looks around and he sees the 18-pounder and he realizes that they have no kind of draft animals to carry any of this stuff.
Yeah, because he was sent to evacuate the fort and destroy it.
Yeah. So he looks around and he sees kind of what all they would have to take. He has 30 men with him to try to destroy this place and then bring it all back. He's like, shit, this is going to be way tougher to move. Maybe I just write back to the government and tell them that this is actually a stronghold. Maybe we should just reinforce this. It's going to make my life so much easier.
Oh, I really don't want to move these cannons.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Alamo itself, I kind of want to describe it so people
perfect.
can start kind of painting a mental picture. So the Alamo, again, a former Spanish mission turned into a fort. So because it was a Spanish mission, that's where the existing kind of facade of the Alamo currently exists right now. It was much bigger.
Didn't even have a roof.
Not the chapel, but
Chapel
the
didn't
actual
have a roof.
The chapel is roughly the size as it is right now. So that was what was first. Then they built the fort around it. So you have the chapel, and then out in front of the chapel. So I'm going to go and kind of describe this north to south. It is a rectangle north to south. And this is the large plaza area. It took up the majority of it. I believe it was 462 feet north to south and 162 feet wide east to west. The plaza went faced north and south, whereas the chapel was kind of off to its 4 o'clock position, still part of the complex, and it faced east and west. You then had, because it had to be manned by soldiers and everything, you had to the north of the chapel and to the west of the east of the plaza, you had a horse pen. And then on the other side of that, further up to the north, you had a cow pen. Now, all of this is surrounded by a wall. The wall was between 9 and 12 feet high in certain places, and the wall itself was about 2 to 3 feet thick. I want to say it was Neil, was like, there's no gun ports in the walls or anything like that, and maybe if we drill gun ports through these walls, it'll weaken them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a catwalk system where my men can actually be standing and firing down from below. But
insane.
At the same
Bad
time,
choice.
He did it to where it's like the wall only went up to your waist. So your entire torso and your head. It wasn't like, well, I'm going to get it like 4 feet high and then do little slits in it where you can fire. It's like, no. You're going to be halfway exposed when you're firing up on top of this wall.
And the half that's exposed is where all the important stuff is.
Exactly, yeah. So the complex itself covered about 3 acres. It included, for the perimeter for the wall in the area that had to be protected, essentially in the case of a siege, it was about 400 meters of perimeter that was having to be watched by however many guys that you had there.
189. The estimates are kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. The Mexican army, when they had lost the fort, had to pull out quickly and left 19 cannons and then an 18-pounder. So the cannons ranged, I want to say, from like 8-pounders to 12-pounders.
I thought there was a 3 in there, too.
There might have been. Like, there were all sizes. I'm just kind of the most of them.
I want to be the 3-pounder guy. That seems like the easiest to handle and probably the one that doesn't get shot at the most.
It does. It sounds like it, right? So the 18-pounder is installed on the southwestern corner. So it's actually in the plaza. Most of the cannons themselves are actually positioned in the plaza. You have 3 on the wall that is facing the west. You have 3 tightly packed on the northern wall that are facing out. You then have 2 that are inside the plaza that are pointing toward the south, and it's actually pointing toward a gate, and that was like the main gate to the south. Mm-hmm. Now, they weren't not able to fire over the walls. These cannons are basically like, hey, if they breach the fort, these cannons are going to defend the entryway. Outside that gate area, they had like a little palisade, like almost like a little half circle area that was defended. Like palisade is essentially just like when you see movies like the wooden defensive walls.
Yeah.
That's what I think of when I think of a palisade. So that had like a palisade going around in kind of a semicircle, and there was a cannon pointing further south, and then I believe one pointing to the east. And then the area between the plaza and the chapel was just this little courtyard, but it didn't have a wall connecting them. It was protected by another palisade, so it was just a taller, basically wooden fence right there. And then that had a cannon facing out, and then there was also a cannon kind of in that courtyard between the plaza and the chapel that was facing out to the west, like defending the entryway.
Yeah.
And then 2 on top of the chapel. So that kind of gives you an idea of how many cannons are here, which means having to even man these guys, the smaller cannons with, let's just be conservative, 3 to 4 guys each. And then the 18-pounder, I think they said required maybe 8 guys.
It was like 8 to 10, I want to say.
So, and they said efficiently to run a cannon, you would want a crew of somewhere between like 8 or 9 guys to be doing all these jobs, to be moving it. But you could apparently make do, because they did, with fewer.
Well, I don't know if you picked up this number too. I think they said if the amount of people they believe, again, 189 was the number that I heard the most. If you had 189 guys inside the Alamo, inside the fort, and you lined everybody up on the catwalks, it was, I think, just enough defensible position that you would have 7 feet in between guys.
And that's with no one inside the fort.
Yeah. That's with everybody up on the wall, the guys that are running the cannons. That's a lot of area you have to cover. That's it doesn't sound like a massive fort, but at the same time, the size of the population inside of it's just not big enough.
It's the ratio of how many people you actually had in it. They said that fort would actually be able to support about 600 men. That's what they would want ideally to have there for defense of the fort.
You're doing it with basically a third of that.
Even, yeah, a little bit less than that.
Had to make the barracks super roomy.
Well, and that's the thing too, is there were buildings within the Alamo itself. It wasn't just the plaza, wasn't just an open courtyard and a wall. They had infantry barracks, they had a jail, they had a well in there, they had a kitchen, they had officer quarters. So there are all these little buildings that are built within the interior of this wall. And those are going to come into play, especially when the battle actually, gets to kind of its crescendo.
And we have Bowie looking around at this fort. It's a lot to destroy. It's a lot to take care of. Neil's talking a pretty good game about how reinforced this is. I've never met Neil before. I don't know how straight of a shooter he was. I'm sure he probably wanted to keep control of this place. So he ends up talking Bowie into basically telling the government, hey, this place is solid. We need to defend this, start sending us guys.
We can't lose the Alamo.
Yeah, there's a letter that he writes to Governor Henry Smith that ends with something along the lines of him and Neil said that they would rather die in the ditches than give it up to the enemy.
By January 6th, I think, so it would be January 6th, 1836, there were less than 100 people that had remained.
That's so few people.
So Neil ends up going to Sam Houston. We're going to talk about Sam Houston in a second. And is basically like, hey, dude, you got 4 days. I can last in this place for maybe 4 days with the amount of guys that I have. And that's not even that's against a smaller force.
Yeah, it's not even what's against who's going to show up.
Mm-hmm. And they've got to be expecting, they know that Santa Anna's on his way. They just really don't have any idea where, because they don't really probably have a large spy network, again, because they're pretty far south of the area that they're currently holding.
Yeah, there's areas in the southeast, kind of towards the Gulf of Mexico, that are actually further south, but they're controlling ports, and Santa Anna's coming up.
He's coming up via
Landside.
land. Yeah, and he's actually coming up a little bit deeper inland. They were like, why didn't he just march up along the coast? Because then he could be resupplied and have to not carry so much equipment. They're like, we don't know. He just decided to march up the interior of the country.
It's very obvious. Practice.
Oh, that's right.
You got to train against all the natives between you getting to San Antonio.
We might as well clear out all the natives while we're just kind of do a sweep.
Yeah, practice our guys, clear them out. Not governor, what was he? Colonel. The colonel that was in charge, James C. Neal, ends up getting word from home that his family is taken ill, and he ends up saying, guys, I got to go. I'll be back. He doesn't.
No, my daughter's sick. I got to get home.
I'm sure maybe.
Is that it? Was that piece of paper that he was holding blank? No, there's totally my daughter's. Okay, bye.
You're not going to supply us. My family's sick. I got to go home. Mm-hmm. Neil does end up coming back in the revolution, and I think he's kind of a guy that plays a pretty important part. So I'm not going to shoot him down too much for that. But he doesn't come back. He's not a part of the Alamo. Again, I'm sure he tried pretty hard to get that place stocked up and ready to go.
Buddy, I think it's pretty safe to say if we talk about it, somebody that comes in later during the Texas Revolution, they weren't at the Alamo.
No, true. After Neil leaves, it is, where are my spots? February 3rd, 1836. Cavalry officer William B. Travis and 30 men arrive inside the Alamo. So what'd you say, we were about 100 at that point in time?
Less than 100 on January 6th. Travis ends up getting there February 3rd. More guys might have bounced. I don't really see them gaining a ton of people. But yeah, he shows up with 30 dudes. So let's just go ahead and call it at this point 120.
We run into a bit of a power struggle here because Jim Bowie has the name. He's a colonel. He is a pretty important guy, very, very popular. And then you have William B. Travis, who comes in, has somewhat of a name, not quite as big of a deal, but when it comes down to Neil leaving and somebody having control of the fort, Bowie and Travis are both basically thrusted up into this position to have command, and an argument starts to ensue.
It comes down, I think, to where most of the people there might have still been militia. I think the guys that Travis showed up with were probably like regulars, part of the regular army. The militia trust Jim Bowie more than they trust Travis. And so they end up raising a stink because Travis is supposed to be the one acting in charge. He's essentially replacing Neil. And then the guys are like, well, if Bowie's not in charge, we're not really going to fight. We'll probably just end up bouncing. So that right there also tells you, like, hey, we're either going to fight for Bowie or not at all. That kind of tells you, even so, like, there was a chance that they weren't married to this place.
Yeah, not everybody was on the same page.
Yeah.
It wasn't same. It was same team, same dream, but we like to have different coaches.
Can we talk about some of these guys real quick and just kind of explain?
Bowie and Travis and everybody?
Yeah, so we have Bowie and Travis.
Well, we still have one more all-star to enter into this picture. February 8th, Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett.
Well, he was the king of the wild frontier.
Oh, yeah, he
Is that what he was?
Yeah. Do you remember Kirby Puckett, the baseball player?
Yeah.
So I had a
absolutely.
Kirby Puckett glove, and we would always sing Kirby Puckett. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, he's a legend. I mean, he's a big deal. We'll talk about some of his accolades a little bit before, but coonskin cap guy, right? Mm-hmm. This was the guy that always wore the finest coonskin cap.
Full leather. We're talking about that sweet, natural brown tanned hide outfit.
Yeah, he made it himself.
He was a frontiersman.
Absolutely made it himself. He had to have. And as soon as Davy Crockett shows up, like, dude, what do you want to do here? Name your position. We will put you in it. Davy Crockett says, make me private. I'm not really here to be in charge. I'm just kind of here to settle some anger issues that I have and just really be a team player. Mm-hmm. I'm sure, again, this, just like you were talking about, seeing the Bowie-Travis dynamic, Davy's probably like, these guys probably aren't all going to fight for me.
I don't want in on this shit. Like, I'm seeing the drama that's going on here. Just put me in a position where I'm only in charge of maybe just even my own guys.
Exactly.
Or maybe just a section and I'll be good there.
Well, and he supposedly rides in with this whole regiment from Tennessee that shows up.
Yeah.
So, again, we have...
It's a small group. I don't know. Yeah, regiment could be a variety of sizes, but never really at any time did they have more than, at the peak when it happened, they had what, like, I mean, and estimates kind of vary because, again, everyone dies, but like 100, 180?
189 to like 200 maybe.
Okay.
So, I mean, the numbers, if Davy Crockett comes in with the regiment from Tennessee, that could be 12 dudes.
Yeah.
It's not.
Everyone's coming in with 30 dudes, so let's just end up saying 30 was kind of the standard.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get into the guys' bathroom break?
Yep.
Cool.
Oh my God, Adam. What is that up in the sky? It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's socials! Oh my God. It's faster than Instagram.
That's historically high pod on Instagram.
More powerful than X?
It's historically high, historically HI on X.
Able to leap tall threads in a single bound.
Back to historically high pod on Threads.
And, I mean, I guess there's still Gmail, right?
We got that too. That is historically high podcast at gmail.com.
All right, guys, back to the show. Okay, it's time to introduce the cast of essentially people that are known as American folk heroes. And I'm not saying they can't be heroes to certain people, but I feel like if you're going to call them that, you probably should know all of the information about them. Yeah,
Bowie didn't know his situation.
Just knew the knife, man. And I knew the name Jim Bowie
and
everything. Bowie, however you want to pronounce it.
He's the one Bowie to me. There's Sam Bowie, there's David Bowie, there's the Bowie knife, but he's Bowie for some reason. I don't know why it just...
So even though it's the Bowie knife, he's Bowie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
the knife is a Bowie knife. I'm all confused on this now.
I bounced back and forth on Bowie and Bowie so many times that I forgot how I said it to begin with. Like, I had to stop thinking about it to get it back. But to bury that lead, we're going to start with William Travis. William Travis, interesting cat. He was a former lawyer in Alabama. He was married with a wife and a child. He ended up racking up a smidge of debt going through school and then not being great in his law practice while he had some money issues. Ends up splitting for Texas in 1831 as a single bachelor. William Travis actually kept a diary for a couple years where he described his sexual proclivities.
So he left his wife and child just to head to Texas and be single?
Yeah. Well, and to run away from the debt.
Okay.
So, I don't know. Interesting start.
Great guy so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I'm sure Travis did some great stuff. I'm not going to sit here and bury him, but it's not going to get a whole lot better. Bought land from Stephen F. Austin. Cool to run that back again. He began practicing law in a place called Anahuac, I believe is the pronunciation. As a practicing lawyer, he ran into something in 1832 that was this slave disturbance. There were 2 escaped slaves, I believe, from that area that were given protection from a Mexican brigadier general in Galveston. He would end up being sued by Travis because this slave owner retained his rights. And in the meantime, while this lawsuit's going on and going through whatever the hell a court looks like back then.
Okay, so who was he representing in this? There were escaped slaves that had made their way into Mexico.
Well, no, this was in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
This was in Texas.
Okay, so escaped slaves escape in a place where slavery is illegal.
But this area has an exemption.
I understand that. But what I'm saying is that they're in a country, not a county, a country in which slavery is illegal. They're making a run for it to try to get into the part of it that doesn't have exemption status, probably. Mm-hmm. And they're protected by a Mexican brigadier general in Galveston.
Yep.
So along the coast. Travis is the one that is suing the general.
He was hired by the slave owner of the 2 slaves that escaped.
To sue the general to return his slaves.
Yep.
Okay.
During this lawsuit, this brigadier general starts to get some threatening letters, kind of about just giving the slaves back so we don't have to go through this. This is going to end up bad for you.
Motherfucker, you're not in your own country.
Well, he's got a militia. He's a part of this militia that he's kind of starting to push on what was definitely a mistake because he's a Mexican brigadier general.
I get that, but the implication is like, I'm going to send out this legal summons or subpoena or whatever to get these guys back. You're denying sending these guys back, which they're technically in part of probably free non-slave Mexico.
Close, yeah.
And now I'm going to send threatening letters, and I also have an armed force in my back that I can come and... But what's the purpose of the court thing? Like, I'm going to try through legal means first, and then if not, we're going to do it through illegal means.
Well, so the brigadier general goes ahead and arrests Travis. Throws him in jail.
Listen here, gringo. You realize that the slavery is exempt in this area, not you talking shit to a fucking Mexican brigadier general.
So the whole time that they're getting ready for these negotiations, I'm sure, to get Travis back and to kind of get this whole thing figured out, Travis is saying, hey, if you don't let me out, my militia is going to come down here and break me out during the negotiations. So you can either let me out now or you can deal with them later. And the brigadier general looks at him and goes, I'll just hold a gun to you the entire time, and if they come to try to attack me, I'll just shoot you. Travis is like... That makes sense.
I had not considered that.
That makes some sense. Militia ends up coming down. They end up getting the contract figured out. Travis ends up getting sprung. I don't know how the suit ended up. I'm probably pretty sure Travis dropped it after being put in Mexican prison.
You want to make it a third time, Bill?
Yeah, maybe we don't try to push that a little further.
Oh, but Billy boy.
Travis also ends up getting arrested, I think it was in 34 or 35, for more militia activities. So the Mexican government, while not strong in this area, is still trying to enforce the rule of Santa Anna. Yeah, in still Mexico. I believe that is all we have on Travis. So now...
At the time of the Battle of the Alamo and everything, he was a lieutenant colonel in charge of like a legion of cavalry, basically. So he ends up showing up. He's the dude that shows up with 30 guys. Bowie had a similar round. Did Bowie? They said,
I don't know.
I think they like.
No, Bowie came with 30 men too.
I think they just like to throw around the term 30.
It sounds. Hey, I like that number. It works for me. We have our next contestant on the Alamo was important. Jim Bowie. Jim Bowie was a land speculator who took some liberties, I would say, forging some land grants near the rivers in Arkansas and Louisiana to him and his brother. And then in doing so, they would sell said land grants for the land that they had forged over to themselves to other people. in Arkansas, there were 126 people that sued Bowie and his brother for these forged land grants. And the reason that they kind of knew that they were forged was a ton of spelling errors.
I was going to say.
Not great. Jim Bowie was an outdoorsman, had
Born
a pretty
in
rough
Logan
upbringing.
County, Kentucky.
Yeah, I believe his father fought in the Revolutionary War, was a bit of a drunk, didn't take care of him. So Bowie just left home and kind of grew up on the land.
Product of his circumstance or environment.
Yeah, just a very interesting kind of character. Of course, after you get in trouble, you get sued. I believe the Supreme Court actually upheld the ruling that all of these documents were forged and he owed these people money for all this land that he sold them that wasn't theirs. Bowie decides, well, probably need to split for a little bit. Heads down to, I believe it was Mississippi, where the world-famous sandbar incident happens.
So this is essentially, aside from the Alamo, why James Bowie was known at the time. The sandbar fight was a gentleman's duel. Bowie was not one of the gentlemen.
Hilarious story.
Yes. There's a sandbar in the middle of the Mississippi River. It's closer to one side than the other. On one side, they were at the point where it was separating Mississippi from what was on the other side, Louisiana, Tennessee. I can't remember which one it was. I'm horrible with United States geography, apparently. But
no, Alabama probably.
Okay. So they had decided neutral territory for this gentleman's duel between these two guys who had a disagreement. This is just how you sell shit, apparently. They come out to the island. They each take rafts out to the island, and it's the two guys that are going to be dueling. And then they each have 5 guys that are like in their corner, like they're hype men and everything for this. And then there was also a couple surgeons out there as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, and in my head, I'm thinking a lot of these duels are going to kind of probably end like this one does. But at the same time, not a lot of duels were fatal.
No.
You would just get winged because these guns were so unruly in how they shot. But at the same time, it was just like the ultimate, it was the equivalent of a gentleman's bar fight of who can just punch the other one. If you shot a guy in the shoulder, yeah, he might end up dying later down the road, or he might actually kill him, and that would be the ultimate victory. But if you tag him and he doesn't tag you, he knows he lost, and he has to walk around with that shame forever. So these two guys are out getting ready to duel on this sandbar and load up their pistols. They do their, I don't know if it was still back-to-back. You take 10 paces, you turn and fire, or if you just did your paces and fired. Each of them fired, neither of them's hit.
Twice.
I know. They reload, then they have to go back. So I'm guessing it was like all 5 guys, 10 guys are watching. They shoot, no one goes down. It's like, all right, give them the next one. They give them pistols again, aim at each other, fire, no one goes down. There's disappointment, no one's hit. So they're like, okay, they walk to the middle, they fucking shake hands.
Awesome.
And they're like, all right, I guess we're going back to our separate sides. The other sides start jawing at each other. I want to say someone gets pissed off, draws a pistol, ends up shooting. He has 2 pistols, shoots at a guy, misses him, but ends up winging with the other shot, Bowie in the hip.
We got a full run up of this brawl. Basically, the guy on the other side that has a problem with Bowie, he's a parish sheriff named Norris Wright. So he's a sheriff that just watched 2 guys duel. He supported one duelist, duelian, whatever they're called.
It was a way to settle the dispute. It's not because it was illegal.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if it's under the law, he's probably going to watch. But he supports one side. Bowie's on the other side, of course, because these two have kind of had this problem for a very long time. The shots go up. Nothing happens, as you're talking about. They just start jawing back and forth. And this is a string of events that the first time I heard it, I thought, how does Jim Bowie make it to the Alamo? There's no way that he survived this scrap. But apparently the guns just weren't that strong back then.
No, it was just a tiny, especially in a pistol.
Yeah.
A ball shot, but guns are fatal now because when a bullet fucking hits you, it mushrooms, it just does so much damage. A ball of shot didn't do that. And that was even if someone actually hit you.
The sheer amount of infection, though.
Well, I know, but okay, so here's the thing. The way this goes down, again, I don't know how he even gets off this sandbar. because he is shot in the hip. And there's different retellings of this, but it all seems the damage he takes and like what happens is kind of universal.
Yep.
I've read one thing that said that the guy wasn't even firing at Bowie, but just because the guns weren't really, he was still on the side that the guy was against. Yeah. And these weren't the two duelists. Nope. These guys weren't the guys like
left.
in this.
Those guys went back to the bar.
So he ends up getting shot in the hip, pulls his big fucking knife after getting spun around, charges at the guy that shot him. The guy clubs him in the head with the butt of the pistol enough to break the pistol. It drops Bowie down to his knees. Another guy pulls a sword cane, which is, it looks like a fencing blade.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit thicker, that was hidden, of course, in a cane. Goes to stab Bowie, catches him in the chest, but it's such a weak fucking blade and has such little force behind it. It penetrates the skin, but his sternum blocks it. As he's being stabbed, he reaches up, grabs the guy stabbing him, pulls him down onto the Bowie knife, kills that guy, pulls out the...
Disemboweled him.
Yeah, pulls out the cane knife as he gets... Oh, he's still on the ground. Other guys come over. He's shot again. He's stabbed again. He gets up, is shot in the arm. Then he cuts one of the guy's chunks out of his forearm, or almost cuts his forearm like off with his Bowie knife. And then somehow the fight just kind of peters out. Everyone's like, all right, everyone, calm down, calm down. Everyone grabs their wounded. There's like 3 surgeons there. They get Bowie carried over to their side of the island and end up patching him up, and he survives. But he's then renowned for this. Here's the thing. Obviously not a good fighter.
No.
Was he famous for his survivability, that he took all this punishment and somehow survived?
So hearing you lay that out just the way that you did, I'm back on Bowie's side. Yeah, I'm back to pro Bowie. Just the sheer level of carnage that this dude took. I mean, he's stabbed, he's shot. Thinking about taking the butt of a pistol just square between the eyes and then getting stabbed immediately right after that. That's to go through that and still be able to walk away. Thank God there were those surgeons there. Those surgeons definitely cleaned him up and saved his life. But also, if you're getting any other typical normal bar fight, say that happens in any other position and there's not surgeons there, you got to die, right?
Yes, 100%.
It was just the fact that he had medical help immediately. But again, you just disemboweled a bunch of people. Are they taking care of you right there?
I mean, technically, he only killed one guy.
He slashed the other guy pretty hard.
Yeah, but that guy didn't die. But again, you are wielding what is basically a short sword. That's going to be pretty memorable. Hey, did you hear about the guy on the sandbar that got shot 8 times and then pulled out a sword?
It's impressive. It certainly is impressive. That next one.
He ends up deciding he's had enough of the Mississippi area after, 3 years later. Probably took him that entire time to recover. But he ends up moving to Texas in 1830. And then, like you were saying, he arrives at the Alamo January 19th with his 30 men.
Oh, we got some more David Bowie history. Oh, shit. Jim Bowie history.
Yeah, not David Bowie, man. No. Don't put them in the same.
No. Bowie ends up heading to Texas, and he finds himself in the situation where he's trying to figure out how to get himself some land. Maybe it's time to settle down. Maybe a few less stabbings going on in his life. Maybe he's tired of being stabbed himself, so he's tired of being shot. Moves down to Texas, becomes a Mexican citizen. Jim Bowie died a Mexican citizen. He did this partially because that was how he was going to end up getting the land. Ends up marrying this woman named Maria Ursula
Bowie.
Yeah, sounds good.
She's the daughter of the vice governor of the province that they're in.
Pretty big deal. Don't know why he did it. On the marriage certificate, he lies about his age. He says that he's 30 instead of 35. Don't know if that's an ego thing. I'm probably pretty sure it would be tough to look at him and think that he was even 35. So 30 was definitely a stretch with as probably grizzled as this dude was. He ends up having to sign a dowry of 15,000 pesos in order to marry Maria. Has to be payable within 2 years. 1833 cholera outbreaks after they get married in 1831. cholera outbreak ends up killing Maria, her parents, and both of the children. Bowie ends up not having to pay the 15,000 peso dowry because they died before it was due.
Because there's no one alive.
Yeah. And his time at the Alamo is maybe the most interesting thing about this to me, because the legend of Jim Bowie is so big that I thought I'd get more for my money.
It comes up short.
Yeah.
He ends up joining the Texas militia when the Texas Revolution started. So he wasn't even with the militia until it actually started, because he was just like, well, fuck, I'm married to the vice governor's daughter. He was probably just living it up.
Had it pretty good. I'm sure he had it pretty good. Now we get to the king of the wild frontier.
Let's do Sam Houston first.
Okay.
Let's save Davey for last. Okay, so Sam Houston, we haven't talked about Sam Houston yet, namesake of the city of Houston, if you guys couldn't figure it out. Steve Austin is the namesake of the city of Austin, and then San Antonio was already named San Antonio de Bejar, so you just get San Antonio. Sam Houston, born 1793, Rockbridge County, Virginia, ran away as a teen. And the reason I mentioned kind of the birth and his teenage years is because it's pretty fucking fascinating. He ends up living with the Cherokee for a while and is given the name Raven, which is pretty badass.
Awesome.
You're just a fucking pale skin hanging out with the Cherokee and your name's Raven. Do you know what it was? Oh, shit. They were making fun of him. Because he was white. Raven's
It was
black.
ironic.
It was like when you call a big guy tiny.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what or a rotund man or slim.
That's not as nice.
What I'm saying is it's an ironic nickname, I think. Guy serves under Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812 and then gets put in charge or participates in the relocating of Cherokee from Tennessee to Arkansas in 1818, becomes a congressional representative in 1823, governor of Tennessee, 1827. 1829, he ends up divorcing his wife and moves to Arkansas to be with the Cherokee again. He's like, fuck this. I actually had more fun living with these guys, so I'm actually going to go back and live with the Cherokee for a while.
I miss being Raven.
I miss being, as ironic as it was, I miss being Raven. Ends up going to Texas in 1832. Post-Battle of Gonzales that we talked about earlier in 1832, he basically helps organize the provisional government. And because of his role in organizing that government that's going to be essentially the Republic of Texas, the ruling body, he's made the top officer, top official in the Texian Army. So the regular army for the Texians.
Pretty cool.
He's going to come into the story as far as kind of somebody that's on the periphery of it, but who, when shit goes down, everyone's just like, send a letter to Sam.
Yeah. The backgrounds as to how they get there, that's kind of maybe the one thing that I did appreciate about learning this so much is everybody has a different story of getting to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so many just different reasons to go into Texas. And it's
Leaving
interesting.
your wife and going to Texas is one of the big ones.
Yeah, that is one of them. But again, just I didn't realize the numbers you were talking about as far as the dates. Davy Crockett syncs up so beautifully with Houston. Obviously, again, King of the Wild Frontier. Hate the song. Always gets stuck in my head. It's been stuck in my head multiple times this week. He ends up fighting with Jackson at the Creek War, who, again, Houston also was fighting under Jackson. I want to say that Travis might have too.
I'm not sure if Travis did.
Somebody else in this picture also fought underneath him. Maybe it was just Houston. Davy Crockett was just an interesting man. I believe he spoke 4 different languages. He was very well read, very well spoken. He ends up being elected to Congress in Tennessee, the state Congress in 1821. So again, kind of along this timeline that you're talking about with Houston, 1827 gets elected to U.S. Congress. Pretty big feather in his cap. He fought alongside Jackson at the Creek War, and while he's in Congress says, I'm going to try to push against the Indian Removal Act. Jackson's Indian Removal Act.
He pretty much opposes Jackson, not just on that. That's what he was very vehemently against. But there were other things that he opposed Jackson. He was the one guy that people are like, man, did you hear the fucking Crockett told Jackson to suck it again during a speech in Congress? And because of this, being very anti-Jackson, he ends up losing his seat in 1831. He's then reelected in 1833, loses the seat again in 1835. And then at that point, I think it was like during a reelection bid or something like that, he gives this little speech about how he's tried to work for the people that he's represented, and then basically just says, you know what, they might go to hell. I would go to Texas. And that's exactly what he does. This guy was, opposed slavery, but was one of those cases where I don't like slavery, and then turns around and sends its slaves out to do his work. So he still did have them. So, I mean, if you oppose it that much, probably shouldn't have them. So I don't know how much you can really even say about that.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, just all in total. And then again, we've talked about all this time in Congress, very common man's man. He wouldn't get up there in a suit and try to talk to the people. He showed up in his normal clothes. He was just kind of a blue-collar guy who was very highly educated. I'm sure he's a fantastic speaker. I mean, the line, go to hell, I'm going to Texas, pretty good line.
Yeah. I wonder if his normal, so like, Canadian tuxedo, all denim.
Gotta be.
If you're wearing all buckskin, what do you call that? Alabama tuxedo? It's an Ozark tuxedo.
An Ozark tuxedo.
An Ozark tuxedo.
I like the Ozark tuxedo. Do you got anybody else?
We got Houston, Bowie, Travis, Crockett, Neal. I think that sets us up. And Santana.
Yeah. To get back to what we were talking about earlier, this kind of build-up, Santa Anna ends up beginning this trip to Behar with 6,000 at the end of 1835. 6,000 strong they were moving up there. As Chris mentioned, they went inland, further inland than I think anybody expected, because they could have gone by boat. Mm-hmm. They could have gone the coastline. He takes them inland because they need to train. I'm sure, just like you pointed out, probably a good opportunity to clear out some natives, some rebel rousers. Along the way, I don't know how this works, they find out that their pay's delayed, and some people quit and head back down to where they started.
So I believe it wasn't so much people that were in like conscripts or were in the Mexican army. It was people that were in charge of hauling like the baggage train, the wagons, to keep like upkeep on that stuff. I'm guessing feeding the what do they call the animals that tow stuff? Pack animals. I think it was those people that actually didn't receive their pay, and they're like, all right, well, we're just going to bounce.
How do you receive your pay, though? Is it one guy in the group that comes by and just throws money in your palms every week? Or?
Maybe when you hit certain outposts or something like that, where there would be a small treasury, something like that, where you would get paid on. I don't know.
They're not mailing paychecks home or anything.
Must have been unreliable enough to be like, they're done listening to promises. Like, we'll catch you at the next stop. They're like, nope, you said that 3 stops ago, man. We're out of here. So they end up losing, a lot of those people. They actually began the march north. They were south of the Rio Grande and began the march north, and pretty far south. I'm not saying just on the southern side of that, but they were marching north, started that December 1835, and it was slow progress. They didn't even cross the Rio Grande or the Rio Grande, however you want to say it, until February 12th of 1836.
But again, you're saying that's slow progress. When they end up arriving in San Antonio, we'll talk about how early they ended up getting there.
Well, early, it's all, perception of what early actually is. But the reason the progress was so slow as well is because a lot of these guys were bringing their families along.
Crazy.
It's so crazy to think about that, these people that are being conscripted, and is, kind of thinking about why this would occur. You're not planning on coming back at that point, not in the sense of like, oh, I'm going up there to die. This is a suicide mission. You're going up here to this part where you're like, if we end up taking this area back, we're going to need to be the ones. Because right now it's just, a bunch of the Texians and everything. We're going to have to come up here and keep a presence. I'm going to bring my family up so that way my family's with me. That also means that all of these supplies that could be just focused on troops, if it was just a military moving, are also being parsed out to these families. And it gets to the point during this march where like some of these soldiers are down to like half rations. So they're not in good shape as it is. And then after they cross the river, happens to be a time when Texas is experiencing like record low temperatures. There was 15 to 16 inches of snow in some places that they were having to trek through. And they weren't prepared for this either. And that's not just carrying their gear and towing wagons and things like that. They're bringing artillery with them.
This sticks in my ass, and I don't know why it does. it seems like every single time we tell one of these battle stories, it's always like the harshest winter that they've had in forever.
Yeah.
Like we've never covered a battle where it's like, yeah, winter came. It was pretty mild.
It was mild winter.
They still kind of helped. It was always harsh.
Got a couple days. It stayed up in the mountains. The resorts were open. It was fine.
Yeah, but you're telling me February 13th, there's 15 to 16 inches of snow on the ground in Texas?
Yeah. Like hypothermia, dysentery, of course. We've all played the Oregon Trail game.
Yep.
It's a huge issue. And then Comanche raids just basically picked and took their toll on this army. And it wasn't enough to basically diminish the army to Santa Anna to be like, hey, we're heading back. It was just making it that much harder for them to get there. And morale had to be just dog shit at that point.
Yeah. I would assume that they were all probably pretty bummed to be there. But we're also not talking about too many guys that were voluntary.
That's true.
A lot of
they
these
were either recruits that signed up for it, or I guess those could be voluntary. Or that was probably a requirement. But then it was also people probably just along the way that they were like, you're serving in the army and you're serving in the army.
Yeah. Do me a favor. Shoot this gun. Close enough. Jump in line.
What's a gun? We'll teach you.
We'll train you along the way. You're going to run into some guys on some horses. You'll get some target practice, basically. As they sneak up, just slowly further and further, February 21st, they reach the Medina River. It's about 25 miles or 40 kilometers away from Behar. February 23rd, the army ends up...
Hold on. You missed one of the best parts.
The guy in the church?
No.
Oh.
So they end up reaching on February 21st. And this army is kind of moving in phases and waves. They do have like a vanguard or like a smaller force that's moving faster. That way, in case they catch them with their pants down, something like that, that they can actually start to fight already. They're not waiting for the entire 6,000 to get up all at one point and then do something.
Less people pulling artillery, too, is just going to go
you're going to
slower.
have your baggage train and everything in the back.
Yeah.
So February 21st, they reach the Medina River, which is 25 miles from Behar. At this point, almost all of the Alamo defenders had decided to go into town to have a fiesta. Not shitting you. The town was having a fiesta. Guys at the Alamo were like, looks pretty cool over there. We're going to go chill out that fiesta. They had guys, Santa Anna had guys that were 25 miles already ahead, scouts, and saw that the Alamo wasn't defended and came back and reported. And he tries to assign this, one of his generals or something like that, hey, take like a 200, 300 men and make a mad dash for the fort. We'll catch them with their pants down. Even if they have time to get back to the fort, they're not going to be able to get prepared and actually mount a really good defense. But fortunately for the defenders, rain actually came in like a sudden rainstorm and pretty much stopped that. So it could have been over much quicker. They could have rolled into town while these guys were trying to have a fiesta.
Mother Nature was on the Texian side.
Apparently.
It did rain on their fiesta, but it also saved their fort.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, February 23rd, they kind of have an idea. They've received word from scouts that Santa Anna's coming with a big-ass force. So the town is like evacuated, and then this is when Travis is like, hey, you, climb up in the clock tower. It's the tallest part of town, and basically get to looking around.
The San Fernando Church. It was the highest point up in the bell tower. He goes up there, the Texian scout spots pretty large force. They said that it was about 1,500 soldiers that he could see. And then again, you had the train and everything else coming up later. And then more reinforcements. Ends up booking it out of the church, runs back to the Alamo, starts yelling, the Mexicans are coming, the Mexicans are coming.
I think it's more of a ring the bell type deal.
Oh, you think that was, okay.
He's in a bell tower.
Fair.
Yeah.
I didn't know if this was like a midnight ride that he was taking back to the Alamo.
And at this point, we didn't even discuss kind of who's in charge of the Alamo at this point. We talked about how Bowie and Travis decided to actually kind of share the role because they couldn't come to an agreement on whose men were going to fight for who. It initially got assigned to James Bowie.
Mm-hmm.
He went out that night and got shit-faced and then came back the next day and they came to an agreement that, hey, we'll go ahead and share command. So I guess everyone's at least fighting on the same, everyone's pointing their rifles in the same direction.
And then he spent another 2 days partying over that, didn't he?
I don't know if he did that. I know the night that he got assigned, he went out and got hammered.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah, Travis puts the dude up in the tower. They see them and spot him about 1.5 miles out. They know that they're coming. That guy's looking out for him. But as soon as the town is evacuating and they get word from the scouts that the army is on its move before it's, 1.5 miles out, they realize that the fort is not supplied. So they're scrambling. They're going into all these houses that these people have evacuated, looking for food, looking for this stuff that they can throw into this fort. They're trying to herd cattle into the cattle pens to be able to have something to eat, depending on how long this siege is going to be. And in essence, I mean, not completely with their pants down, but they were not prepared for this. They hadn't received any other reinforcements. They have guys showing up in groups of 30. And at this point, like we were talking about, maybe between 180 and 200 people get into the fort and lock it up when it's said and done.
They thought they had, and again, I don't know how this time estimate comes up. They thought they had about another 3 weeks before the Mexican army was going to show up. So this march that they thought was going to take almost another whole month, which I'm sure they're probably like, God, it's cold. I bet there's a bunch of snow on the ground. They couldn't be moving that fast. But they cut a trail. They end up making it up there. I love, and it, maybe not love is the right word, but I think it's an interesting look into Santa Anna because supposedly when they get there, he sends a guy up into that same bell tower in the church. They send out a red flag.
Yeah, by late afternoon on that day, on February 23rd, Behar was occupied. So Behar is San Antonio. Just think of it, San Antonio proper.
Yeah.
The Alamo at this point, because San Antonio wasn't as big as San Antonio is now, and it's not within the city, it was outside the city. 1,500 Mexican soldiers come in and occupy Behar. So they are literally just in the fort. This is where these guys are. There is no help anywhere. And after these guys take Behar, the next logical conclusion is they're going to go and start surrounding the fort.
Yeah, it's like river and then fort.
Yep. But before they do, like you said, Santa Anna has them raise this red flag. And the red flag is basically, I got to go back a little bit, sorry. Santa Anna had stated once this revolution started happening after Gonzales, maybe a little bit before it, that anybody that was there, even though they had that exemption, anybody that was there legally, even the citizens, anybody fighting against the Mexican government were to be considered pirates and were to be subjected to the rules of engagement or, I guess, rules of punishment that pirates are subjected to, which is execution.
Yep.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
No quarter.
This red flag basically symbolizes to these guys, hey, just a heads up to you guys over in the Alamo, no quarter.
Will be given.
You are going to be executed on this if you fight against, because again, they haven't fired a shot yet, really. So it's like, hey, we know you guys are part of the revolution, but at the same time, you haven't actually fought against this, so you're not in that pirate status yet. Once this thing kicks off, this red flag means that this thing doesn't end until all of you are dead.
Well, this isn't a very new idea, and there's some theories that Santa Anna actually learned this in his time working in the Spanish Army because they were sent out on a raid, and I guess not a raid, they were sent out to quell a rebellion.
Campaign.
Yeah, and they were given the orders with the red flag of no quarter, and Santa Anna saw how effective it was to just kill everybody. That from there on out, it's like, oh, well, if I need to get something done, that's just how we're going to do it.
Yeah, you the next people in line that are thinking about that, see what happened to the people beforehand. I'm not saying it's the right tactic, but you can see why it would be an effective tactic. Yeah.
Yeah. So, flag of no quarter goes up. We need an answer from the fort, right?
Well, I mean, here's the deal. You're in that fort and you got an eye on Behar, and you've just watched 1,500 soldiers walk in and occupy it. At that point, you got to be like, okay, listen, guys, realistically speaking, the fort is pretty well protected, but we have so little, so few guys here from what we should have. We're not super well supplied. We should probably be like, hey, let's run up a flag that maybe says, hey, we want to talk, or maybe something like that. No, that's not the response Travis gives. What does he do?
Fire the 18-pounder.
Doesn't fire at anyone, just fires it off to be like, hey,
saw your flag.
Basically, it's on. Bowie comes up and he's like, the fuck are you doing, man? He's pissed off, thinks he jumped the gun, and basically sends out his own guy, a rep, to go and negotiate a surrender.
I believe it was a woman.
That happens a little bit later.
I think it's the same woman that goes back.
Is it? I thought it was one of his men that he sent out.
Well, I believe that was after Travis realizes that Bowie sends out his emissary to try to go talk about a surrender. He gets angry and jealous because, again, they're splitting command. Travis then sends one of his men.
Just turns around and he's like, chase the other guy down, and then when you get there, you're also negotiating on our behalf. So
run, but don't run fast enough that you're going to lose your breath.
Yeah, get there at the same time. So both of these emissaries, I guess you could call them, end up meeting with the Mexican colonels, not Santa Anna, two of his other guys, because I think Santa Anna hasn't arrived. He's not the guy that's going to be coming with the initial force.
Yeah.
He's leading this whole thing. So he's going to be coming with maybe the second, third group of reinforcements. After they've quelled everything, got a nice setup, found the swankiest digs in town and Bayhard to set up Santa Anna in. So they meet up with these two colonels, and basically they're like, hey, we would like to, propose an honorable surrender. And the guy's like, yeah, that's not going to be really good for us. And an honorable surrender is basically just another name for a conditional surrender. Conditional surrender would basically be like, hey, we're going to surrender the fort to you, but we want safe passage for all the troops and all that kind of stuff. We want to be able to go about our business and, get out of here.
We want to leave with our honor intact.
Santa Anna was like, actually, I've been trying out this thing around Mexico where we don't do that. And your surrender is going to need to be completely unconditional. That's the rules.
You guys saw the red flag, right?
Mm-hmm. Unconditional surrender. Take that back to your bosses. They turn around, they head back into the fort. All of a sudden, Travis and Bowie are having a conversation. The honorable surrender has been, shot down. What do we do? Fire the 18-pounder.
I love that that's the idea. Like, well, you did it before and it seemed to get his attention.
Where was the come and take it?
Yeah. This is like Wayne's World where they're just yelling game on with the 18-pounder to let them know.
Pretty much. But at the same time, did you hear about that in regular history class that they went out there to try to surrender?
Mm-mm.
No. You don't hear about that because that does a certain thing to maybe dampen the mystique about the people who were all about staying in that spot and not giving it up or anything like that.
Absolutely. Also, at the same time, if I'm in their position, I wouldn't have been in their position. But if I'm in their position somehow.
If you're one of the guys that is forced to follow one of the other guys that put them in that position.
Yep. I have as much surrender or escape on my mind as humanly possible. So these guys definitely had bigger stones than I do, because I would have been trying to figure out, I'd have been starting to learn a dance or something like that and been like, hey, I'm one of you guys, something.
I'm watching those 1,500 guys march into town, and they're looking over at me, and I'm packing my bag being like, so we're getting the fuck out of here, right? Like, everyone knows how to count, at least to tell that, look how many people we have. Look, they're still marching people into the fucking city, and it's been 30 minutes.
Yeah.
We're getting out of here, right? No.
Just very brave men. Bravery is the word that I'm going to use there. Very brave men.
So, Blast of the Cannon, it's on. This is what kicks off, essentially, the Battle of the Alamo.
Yeah, we get a pretty unceremonious first day. Not a whole lot going on, but I'm sure it's also just moving troops into position,
You're
kind of feeling things out.
Because you did bring in cannons and everything, you know that the fort has cannons. You got to breach the walls or at least put pressure on them, especially to cover your troops, because you know you're going to have to try to take the fort. So they spend those first few days basically establishing like artillery positions. They establish the bulk of the cannons that they brought on the south and east sides of it. I think that's also the east side would be the one that the chapel is on, where it's just that palisade, so probably a little bit more lightly defended. And then south, because that's where the main entrance is. Again, they don't have the bulk of the cannons that are pointing that direction. And it's, I guess that would be the main entry point, would be trying to get those doors down.
Yeah. And they station them very logically, 1,000 feet, like you just said, from the south and the east walls. 3 batteries are set in the southeast, like you were saying. Week 1, 200 cannonballs landed in the Alamo Plaza in week 1. So not a whole lot. Also, at the same time, they start sighting in.
That's what landed in there. That's not hitting the walls.
I guess.
And everything.
I just figure a bombardment, usually, a siege we hear about, a lot different.
That terrifies the shit out of me, that those balls were making it into the plaza. Because guess what? They're still traveling fast enough that they're really hard to see. You could just be walking around in the plaza and a cannonball could come lobbed over the fucking side. There wasn't a safe place in there.
Good news is if it hits you in the head, you're not going to know what happened.
What if it takes you out in the leg and knocks your leg off?
That's a bad choice.
Because it's more likely to do that. You got a lot more body than just your head.
Yeah.
crushes your ribs and you're sitting there in the hospital just fucking slowly dying.
They kind of figured out this, basically the length of the rifles, or the length of the distance that the rifles could fire
Like
from
the
the fort.
effective range?
Yeah, it was about 200 yards. This was going to be, along with, again, all these cannons that they have up there, these artillery. The main issue was all of these Texians grew up in a very certain way. You grew up with a rifle in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up hunting in the forest. It's a situation where these guys were crack shots. They also, I believe, had bore barrels, so you're going to be able to fire a lot more accurately. These guns have better gunpowder in them. They're just better guns all the way along. Good enough that you can actually hold it up to your eye and aim and take a really good shot.
You're also hidden halfway behind a wall, so
Yeah.
you got some cover. There were also some like outbuildings kind of around the walls and everything, like little shacks or sheds, things like that. And so those are going to kind of come into play here in a little bit. But there's also areas that you can kind of go outside. You're going to see people go outside the walls here in a couple different instances. That first week, a few key things did actually happen that first week. February 24th, which is technically 2 days, 3
Day
days
two.
after they get there.
Day 2 is day 2 of the siege.
Day 2 of the siege or the actual battle. Bowie goes down sick, pneumonia, something like that. And this is not just like, this is like, I can't get up, I can't command, I'm confined to bed. So he's essentially put into the infirmary, the hospital, and he spends the entirety of the Battle of the Alamo in bed.
Maybe
I know that's...
we'll give him 48 hours in the fight before Bowie's taken out of service.
Yeah. But I mean, the lightest part of the fighting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, very, as much as he's built up as this folklore figure, very anticlimactic for what he actually does during the Battle of the Alamo.
It's kind of a bummer. I was hoping to get a little bit more out of him. I don't know if it was the drinking and celebration that maybe started the pneumonia. But either way, I think he also had contracted like tuberculosis or something like that as a kid, so it could have been a flare-up from that. A number of things. Timing couldn't have been worse. I guess maybe day 1 would have been worse, but timing really couldn't have been worse.
Go ahead.
This ends up transferring all the power to Travis.
Yeah.
So Travis is solo in charge. Any basically emissary that's going to be sent out for surrender will probably end up being his guy.
Well, they don't send out someone to surrender.
Not yet.
Again, or anything like that. But what Travis
They will.
does do... Well, yeah. But what Travis also does on the 24th is this is when he sends this famous letter, I shall never surrender or retreat. It's basically him asking... Are you going to read it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's very weird how it's worded, and I got some issues with it because it really drives home the fact of what these guys are actually doing there. Again, try to step outside this and view this as country A and country B, regardless of where you are in the world. And just remember, you have country C. So you have all these people from country A who have come in most illegally into country B and are wanting to steal part of country B's land in order to create country C. They're invaders.
Yeah. And again, we're holding this up to the standards of 2025. Back then, this was viewed a little bit differently. It was...
Again, we'll get people that want to go ahead and complain and bitch about like the revisionists or like looking back and trying to say, well, it was the times and it was normal. Guess what? We have the advantage of being able to look back at history and seeing how truly fucked up stuff is. And that's part of looking back, and that's part of how much fun we have on this is looking back and saying, there's a lot that was messed up about that. And finding out like, oh shit, like these people were actually invaders in another country that were just trying to start. They weren't even fighting for the United States, man. Like what it's so lauded that they were, that doesn't come till later, the American or Mexican-American War. But this is essentially people that have left the United States and decide they don't want to be American United States citizens anymore. They're going to start their own country to not beholden to the rules of the United States.
Yeah, I don't have any negative feelings towards these guys because I understand that this is kind of the times of what happened. I can look at it now and say this is not an American story. This is kind of solely a Texas story.
Yeah, exactly.
So if this is taught during American history in school, it's kind of off because
it's international history.
Yeah, it's international history basically. Travis writes this letter. He starts off, I'm going to try to kill this voice. To all the people of Texas and all Americans in the world, fellow citizens and compatriots, I am besieged by 1,000 or more of the Mexicans under Santa Anna. I have sustained continual bombardment and cannonade for 24 hours and have not lost a man. Not lost a man's an interesting term. Maybe nobody injured if there was nobody injured, or did somebody maybe take that cannonball to the shin? You don't know. Mm-hmm. Interesting. The enemy has demanded a surrender at discretion, otherwise the garrisons are to be put to the sword if the fort is taken. I have answered the demand with a cannon shot. Our flag still waves proudly from the walls. I shall never surrender or retreat. Then I call on you in the name of liberty, of patriotism, and everything dear to the American character, to come to our aid with all dispatch. The enemy is receiving reinforcements daily and will no doubt increase to 3,000 or 4,000 in 4 or 5 days. If this call is neglected, I am determined to sustain myself as long as possible and die like a soldier, who never forgets what is due to his own honor and that of his country, victory or death. William Barrett Travis, Lieutenant Colonel Commander. P.S. The Lord is on our side. When the enemy appears in sight, we had not 3 bushels of corn. We have since found in deserted houses 80 or 90 bushels, and got into the walls 20 or 30 heads of beeves. Travis. The hell's a beeve? Is that a cow?
I don't know.
Also, I don't know if it's a brag that you found 80 or 90 bushels and you're asking a bunch more people to come down. It seems like maybe rations are low, so maybe a large turnout's not going to turn out well for you.
Do you notice something about that letter? I'm not trying to, speak ill of the dead or anything like that, but there's something that's very particular about that letter. It doesn't state where they're at.
No.
If that letter were to explain, I am well inside Mexico's country in a fort that we've illegally taken, I'm asking for Americans. I'm asking for another country to come in and invade this country to help us with this fight we started because we want to start another country.
Yeah, I mean, it's us getting support from the French during the Revolution. It's, in a way, it follows a similar pattern. Nobody's ever, I think, succeeded in revolution by themselves. They've always been aided by somebody. I guess maybe the Mexicans did it more against Spain. But at the same time, it reads to me like, hey, we took this chess piece for you guys, or we took this spot on the board for you guys. Now you guys come down, and if you help us win and we become the Republic of Texas, if you help us win, we'll grease your palms a little bit. And also this gives an extra layer of protection because we are still going to be between you and Mexico. And I'm sure even the government in the United States will be like, shit, they want to become a republic. Is there any chance that we could turn them into a state? And it turns out that 9-10 years later, we do see Texas become a member of the United States. So I think there might have been a long game for the people in the government in the United States to be like, they might not achieve a republic, but we could end up snagging them up on the cheap.
Yeah, we talked about this last night, I think. How much it was probably just the United States sitting back and being like, let's just see what plays out here. Yeah. We're not going to go ahead and commit the United States Army to do this and start a war with Mexico. But on the off chance that they do actually take this, there's still going to be a threat from Mexico. They're still going to have to hold that land. It's going to be very tenuous. They're barely establishing a government. There's going to be a time when they have to look not south, but they're going to be looking over to the east and saying, hey, we really need some help. And we're going to be there and be like, you know how we can best help? You guys just became part of the United States.
Just sneak in. It'll be okay.
Also, another interesting fact with that speech, he mentions that their flag still flies on the Alamo, right? Mm-hmm. What do you take that to mean? The way he's writing this letter to all Americans and the way he states that, Is your assumption when he says that it's the American flag flying over the Alamo?
Not a Mexican flag with the numbers, was it 1824?
It was something like that. It was not an American flag.
Well, it was the Mexican flag, but the 1824 signified the Constitution that they wanted back.
Correct. But it wasn't an American. What I'm trying to get
Oh, no, it wasn't the stars and bars.
is the way that it's stated in here. The way this letter is written.
Not the stars and bars,
is that
just ours.
An American-owned place is under an invasion or under attack. It's got the American flag flying over this. This is the kind of stuff, like, this is what you learn in high school. And this is why this kind of stuff, and if I sound kind of miffed about it, it's because I am. Because I feel I was fucking lied to in high school. But the fact that this letter is written in a way that they don't state that they're in another country's territory, that they're pleading to, the United States that, hey, and they're saying our flag still flies. That, to me, anyone reading that outside of, Tejas or whatever it is saying that, and they're saying, oh my God, just like you said, they're fighting for us. They're holding that for us. They're holding that for the Republic of Texas.
Yeah, they're fighting for themselves.
I'm not trying to piss off people from Texas because I know this is a huge thing, but you can still be proud of your history, just like we're proud about fighting against the British over fucking lack of representation and taxes and all that kind of stuff. Except, and I hate to say this, one of the reasons that they fought up against Mexico and they want to secede was because Mexico told them they couldn't have slaves anymore.
And they wanted to tax them.
And they wanted to tax them. They wanted to go ahead and keep not paying taxes, and they wanted to keep their slaves, so they went to war. I don't really see that that's a benevolent reason to go to war. I have a fundamental disagreement with that reason.
Yeah. 2025, that's a reason that we could look at and say it's not.
I mean, it's been a reason for the last 200. It should be common sense, yeah.
True. After this letter goes out, Santa Anna, I'm not going to give him a whole lot of credit. He wasn't a great military leader. Does do a few things right. He sends a Mexican company that's posted on the road to Gonzales to go ahead and try to pick anybody off that's trying to come up for any reinforcements.
They barely get the guy that is going out with the letter. Yeah. I think they send maybe a couple guys out. One of you's going to make it, try to get this into the hands of the Texian Army or whatever.
I also don't know how much they harass the carriers, because if it draws more people to it in Santa Anna, I think he's ready to go.
I have conflicting thoughts on that, just for the simple fact of Santa Anna throughout this is going to show that he wants to wrap this up quickly. It doesn't seem like it at this point, but at a certain point, he's just like, let's just get this show on the road and get this done. We've talked about a couple different battles and everything like that during a siege, I think we talked about this, it was really during Tobruk, during the Africa campaign episode. How long you could hold a siege really depended on how quickly someone could sneak up behind you. Because you could constantly resupply. Places that were being sieged usually couldn't. You just had to worry about getting jumped from behind or another force showing up. How many sieges had to get broken like that in World War II?
True.
Santa Anna's thinking to himself, if I lit these, I've already shown the red flag. We're already exchanging shots. Anybody that was going to get the fuck out of there would have already gotten out of there while they could. Anyone coming out of here, if they're carrying a letter, if they're going for help, is just someone that can notify the next guy down the road, hey, we need reinforcements down here. And then I got to worry about someone coming in from the other direction. I think you had to sneak. I think they would have killed these guys had they caught him.
Yeah, it certainly could be that way. And just the way he has it set up, because I believe that if Santa Anna thinks that he can get people out in the open, he's fine. Because he has those dragoons. He has that cavalry to be able to take those guys.
No, I understand that. But what I'm saying is, what if like an organized Texian army then marches in there? I don't think he's worried about someone going and getting 30 other guys.
You don't think that he knew that they didn't have that in their bag?
No, because again, they didn't even know, as far as Santa Anna's army, they got caught fucking, not even noticing that they were moving up. They thought they still had another 3 weeks or a month.
Yeah.
I don't think information, it's not, we discussed like so many, World War II episodes where even then the flow of information, you had scouts, you had radios, all that kind of stuff. Santa Anna is basically probably sending people out to the north of the Alamo and to the north of Behar, being like, keep your fucking eyes out, because I'm guessing that they're going to be trying to march an army down here as well.
Yeah. And that's, again, he deploys 800 dragoons that were stationed along the road to Goliad. So he has Gonzales kind of blocked off. He has Goliad blocked off.
Goliad is also kind of like the area that the Texians held. It was more of like a Texian center, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And within that Texan Center, there is a man that we run into named Colonel James Fannin. Colonel James Fannin ends up getting the letter, the Travis plea, and he suffers from, I don't know, the yips, maybe a self-confidence issue.
Case of indecision.
Yeah, which isn't always good when you're the colonel and you're leading a force like that. Says, well, this isn't coming from the government. This is just coming from Travis. I would be the most likely person to come because I have the most forces there. Yeah, let's try it.
He doesn't just say that initially.
Well, initially he's no, because he didn't get it from the government.
Oh, yeah, correct. Yeah, he gets it and he's like, I know that I'm going to get called upon for this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he waits for what, 2 days?
I think so.
Before he really does anything. On the 24th as well, that's actually when the first fatalities, I believe, for the battle that are recognized occur. And it's a couple of Mexican Army scouts. February 25th rolls around, and those shacks that we were talking about earlier that kind of surround the Alamo, 200 to 300 Mexican troops actually occupy and are using the shacks as cover to try to get closer to the walls. Well, can't shoot them if they're behind the walls. They can just sit there and keep packing up, bringing up equipment, bringing up more men. So they have to send out some of the guys in the Alamo, have to go out there and start torching and trying to burn these shacks. So it ends up leading to this little 2-hour skirmish while they go out there to try to burn them. And they're able to, because of the crack shooting and things like that, and also the cannons being in range of the buildings and everything.
Lay a little cover fire down there for him. Should be okay.
They're able to go ahead and go out there and drive the Mexican army off. They end up retreating back to Behar. I think it was a total of and again, these figures, you're getting figures from both sides. It's going to be unreliable because it's always going to be inflated for how many people died or were killed to make everyone look good. 6 dead, 4 wounded on the Mexican side. I don't think anybody got injured or killed on the side of the Texians.
Success.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing the same thing that you've been doing. You've been just having victory after victory. Hey, this thing might be easy. So 26 rolls around next day. They're like, okay, well, we had pretty good success. Let's go out and burn the rest of the huts and burn down the rest of the shacks. So we have a clear line of sight out of here. This one is a little bit more costly, not by much though, because I think one Texian is actually killed. And it's on this day, 2 days after the letter is sent out, that Colonel Fannin is like, okay, we're going to go. I'm going to load up. We're going to get 320 men. We're bringing 4 cannons with us and all of our supplies. We're going to lift this siege. It's 90 miles away. So they still have pretty long to march and everything. Doesn't help when they get about a mile outside of town. A couple things happen. Maybe a wheel falls off. Fannin's like, nope, can't do it. It's falling apart already. That's an omen. That's a sign. Turn back. They turned back after a mile. And I'm pretty confident that maybe Fannin was walking alongside one of those wagons and then just reaches over and starts yanking on one of the wheels, trying to pull it off. And as soon as it falls off, he's like, hey, hold up, everyone. It's a bad sign. We're not even a mile outside town and we're already breaking down. We should probably just wrap this one up, chalk it up as a we did not complete assignment.
Yep.
And we'll just go ahead and head back. So
let's head back to town. Sir, we're still in the suburbs. Okay, so it's a shorter walk. 89 miles that way or 1 mile this way.
You're making a good point. I'm going to ride ahead and be back home in less than 5 minutes. You guys just make sure everything gets back within the city.
He also heard that there were troops that had branched off from Santa Anna's marching brigade that were headed that way. So he had a little bit of cover, but you can't tell me that you get 1 mile into a 90-mile journey and you just panic and turn around. Nobody was sending somebody to be like, hey, they're actually coming, so you guys need to return.
Yeah.
He just decided to turn it around and head back.
Not going.
No.
That's what happens is when it takes you 2 days to decide. You're like, fuck it, I'll do it. I'm going to do it. Get a mile outside town. You're like, knew I shouldn't have done it. Nope, having second thoughts.
But again, in retrospect, middle of March, he hears about what happens at the Alamo. Probably not too bummed that he didn't join that party.
Yeah.
He probably made the right decision.
He's like, I knew it.
Yeah. Not for everybody in the Alamo, but he made the right decision for Fannin. Mm-hmm. I believe it was that same night. There's a bit of an oopsie. Back at the fort.
That was the 27th. So next day. Yeah.
Next night. We got anything before that?
Nope.
Yeah. The night of the 27th. 32 brave men that were coming down from Gonzales were trying to sneak into the fort, and everybody must have been a little jumpy in the fort because they see these 32 shadows coming towards them and start to lay a little bit of what they would come to find out is friendly fire. How they knew that it was friendly fire was one of the men ended up getting struck and started to curse loudly in English. And they realized that the Mexican army wouldn't be cursing in English. They're like, oh, shit, that was one of ours.
Yeah.
Open the gate. Get him in here. Let's see if we can get him patched up.
So they get 31 and a half guys into the Alamo. So now they've actually bolstered. And this is where I think we get closer to like the 200 number. Yeah, I'm sure those guys were really happy once they got into the Alamo and actually saw how many guys were in there. They were like, fuck. Can you guys open the gate and we can maybe head back out? We snuck in one time. Just don't shoot us in the asses on the way out.
Half of you guys are asleep in the barracks, right? We're only seeing half the people here. No? Shit.
Well, March 3rd rolls around. So, I mean, they're there for, 6 days before, maybe 7 days before. Actually, sorry, February is only 28 days. They're there for about 4 days. And they're like, okay, nothing. They've been firing on us and everything. Cannonballs have come over the wall. But, man, they're not really doing anything. Maybe more people will show up.
24 hours a day for each one of those days. They're getting bombarded.
Yeah, and I think we kind of talked about what that might have been like because you're not going to be wasting all your shot and everything. But psychologically, if you can simply keep up that bombardment and keep people on alert, keep them stressed, keep them awake, you're maybe firing a cannon every couple of minutes just so they don't forget that you're there. And then if you just do that consistently, they're going off enough to where you can't doze off because guess what? You don't know when that cannonball is leading up to an attack. You don't know when it's cover fire for someone charging the walls.
It's like trying to sleep while the smoke alarm has a low battery chirp.
I want to say there was, what war was it? That they started playing music out of speakers to just fuck with like the enemy?
That was David Koresh.
Yeah, they did it they used to do it for psychological warfare during like a war. It might have been like Vietnam or something.
Possibly.
That's going to be a good episode.
Yeah.
Good
episodes.
A good month long of episodes. All right. So getting back to this, March 3rd rolls around. 1,000 more Mexican troops end up reaching Behar. So just 4 days, you get to see that juxtaposition. Hey, man, we just got 32 more guys in the fort. Fantastic. Okay, everyone, this is what we're going to do. 4 days later, you just watch as another 1,000 troops end up coming in. And you're just like, huh. All right. So March 4th rolls around. Travis goes to Crockett and he's like, you got to fucking get us some help, man.
We need something.
You got to get us more guys. And so I believe Crockett actually goes out with someone else. They're able to sneak past the lines, takes a couple of his guys. They're fucking sneaky. He's king of the wild frontier.
Yeah,
no one's going to catch him.
You're not catching that
He's
guy.
the goddamn Midnight Rider. Ain't no one going to catch him.
All they see is a little raccoon running along the grass. Like, yeah,
Ignore it.
Not a big deal.
Floating 3 feet above the grass. That's where the certain legends come in. Yeah. So he ends up finding reinforcements about 20 miles away. It was someone who had kind of heard about Fannin moving in. And they were like, okay, Fannon's already taken care of this, so we'll go ahead and hang out 20 miles away, and then if they need us again, we can ride in. He goes out, he ends up pulling some of these guys back. Not many. A handful of guys. Maybe a dozen. But ends up, and I want to know what this speech, I want to know what this pitch he gives these guys are.
Maybe it's, I'm Davy Crockett. Come follow me.
Come with me if you want to not live.
He probably didn't say that, but
No.
yeah. Yeah, so again, 1,000 troops roll in. Next day, 12, 20, something like that rolls in. I read that it was 50. At the same time, 50 doesn't really fall into that kind of magic number of how many Texian troops they believe died there. And spoiler alert, pretty much everybody died. All the troops, at least. Santa Anna starts talking assault right around March 4th. He's kind of had enough of it.
Hold on real quick. So, like you were saying, during that first week where 200 plus cannonballs had made their way into the plaza, they were just using those, reusing them. And just because, again, most of the cannons, if not all of them, except for that 18-pounder, were all from the Mexican army. Yeah. So they're then using the powder they have and everything and just launching these cannonballs right back at them. until Travis is like, oh shit, we can't really go shot for shot with these guys because we have no way to resupply and they're just constantly bringing in more. He stops them firing on the 26th.
Really?
Yeah. He's like, we're going to have to hold this stuff and we got to hold the rest of the ammunition and the powder because there's eventually going to be an assault and we're going to need this when the assault actually happens. So from the 26th on, Travis is like, only fire if you have to. We're in conservation mode at this point.
Just sitting ducks.
Still on March 4th, this is when Santa Anna, I think, goes to his guys, his officers, and he's like, enough fucking around. I showed up here a few days ago, maybe a week ago. You guys already had a week. I'm kind of looking at how many guys I'm looking at in my room, looking at through my spyglass. They don't have that many guys. We got this fort entirely surrounded. I want this thing taken. And the officers are like, okay, it's going to cost a lot of guys. We actually have these larger 12-pound siege cannons.
So close.
That are coming up the road. They're going to be here. We can just bombard them with that for a little bit, tear down the walls, make it much easier to actually get into this place and actually take it.
No, it's easier than climbing a wall, walking through a wall.
Going right through a doorway or going right through a hole that you actually punch through the wall. Because again, these are still 9 to 12 foot high walls. Even in the areas where they're just the palisades, those are more heavily defended and they have cannons. So, it's still going to cost some guys. Santana's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and wait for 2 days. This thing's going down on the 6th, whether these siege cannons are here or not. That's when we're planning. So start getting a plan of attack together because it's going down.
Also, I believe this might have been the thing that really launched that into his head. There was one more attempt by a woman named Juana Navarro Alsbury, who was Bowie's sister-in-law, to go out and maybe try to talk some reasoning into Santa Anna.
Senor Santa Anna, please. My brother-in-law, he's an idiot. He's been stabbed and shot many times. He does not know what he's doing.
He's laying in a cot in the fort right now.
Yeah. Can you just get him out?
Yeah, just maybe him and me. Just sneak us both out. Santa Anna's pretty tired. He already had to tell him once that this, actually he told him twice that this was an unconditional surrender with a red flag, and then actually 3 times because he told both of the emissaries.
And at the same time, he's like, you made me come all the way up here from the capital to have to do this. So no, the answer is no.
Yeah, and Santa Anna, as you said, schedules assault for early morning on the 6th. March 5th, this is where we get a story that kind of bums me out that I got a rain on it. Supposedly, Travis draws the line in the dirt, and he tells them on this side, if you cross that line, you will be fighting with me to the death, which I'm sure we talked about this before the episode. There was certainly a discussion that happened.
There was a discussion happening the entire time.
Yeah.
From the time those first 1,500 troops showed up, there were discussions.
He says, come with me on this side of the line. You'll die a hero.
Die for the
cross
cause.
that line, turn around and run. Supposedly the story is that everybody else crossed the line but one Frenchman. I don't know why we have to fire at the Frenchman.
Fire shots at the Frenchman.
Easy target. This story pops up in history like 20 to 30 years after the Alamo. And again, there's no soldier that would have heard this story that lived to tell the story.
There's one. But I don't think this guy...
He's not telling the story that way.
He's not telling of any favorable things about Travis.
No.
The line in the sand thing, whether that's, fictional or not, there is still stories of him not doing that, but still saying like, hey, if you're going to go ahead and leave now. Anyone that's going to stay is doing so with the knowledge that they're fighting, for the cause and to the death. And it's going to end in, pretty much it's going to end bad for everybody. At the same time, you're doing this on March 5th when they've already got reinforcements. The area is fucking surrounded. And you've already pissed on the unconditional surrender. It's not on the table anymore. Anyone leaving, is that a choice? Is that an actual legitimate choice? Like, it's either stay in here and live for a little bit longer or take your chances running out there and them finding you.
Cavalry everywhere.
You're
They're
not
circling.
going, and you're not going with a horse. You're on foot. How far are you going to have to get on foot? And guess what? You're not taking supplies. We need all those. I don't think it was a choice.
No. No, certainly not at that point. I don't know when it would have been a choice, maybe day 1, day 2, but I think after they got the station surrounded, I think it was pretty much moot.
Good news, though. 10 p.m. that night, the Mexicans stopped their bombardment.
Well, and even before that, the last courier ends up leaving on the 5th. Before that happens, he's carrying a personal letter from Travis and some other soldiers to get out. I can't imagine those letters were very bright and cheery.
Just one that just says, fuck!
Yeah. Sorry. Bad mistake. Yeah. Relative peace after 10 p.m. The cannons stop. And at that point in time, you've been under siege for so long and you get a little bit of a break. I don't blame these guys for sleeping. I think that they should have realized that once the bombardment ended, there was definitely something coming up that they should be awake for.
Yeah.
I can't put myself in my shoes and say that I could have been able to stay awake for any longer.
That level of stress, regardless of who you are. Also knowing that you're on borrowed time. You know you're on borrowed time.
Yeah.
And just fraying your nerves and wearing on you. As soon as Travis comes around and tells everyone, hey, it looks like they start firing, why doesn't everyone get some sleep? Because some shit's going to go down. We all need to be rested. So 10 p.m., they stop firing. The defenders are like, thank God. We can finally try to kind of, compose ourselves and everything like that. And that was a mistake. Because 2 hours later, after midnight, Santa Anna's plan goes into effect when he starts moving troops in. He has the cavalry make sure they're set up in positions completely surrounding at a distance. They're not just like right at the walls.
Yeah, they're roaming.
But they're roaming around, so they're completely surrounded for any runners. And he starts moving under cloud cover that's blocking like any moonlight or anything like that. And again, think of it this way. We're so used to electricity. We're so used to there to being just light pollution and everything like that. If the light is not coming from the torches and the fires that are in the Alamo, and again, those are being used by wood. There was a couple of little anecdotes about it that said, like, because there was a cold snap that came in as well, that they were trying to find firewood and they were having to send guys out, and they kept getting pushed back into the Alamo by the raiding parties and everything like that. And so they were having to conserve firewood too. So you're not having a lot of light. I'm sure the Mexican army has fires and everything that are way off in the distance. Again, like you said, cannons are probably 1,000 feet out, maybe a little bit less than that. So there's just this expanse of just pitch black.
It's just an ether,
yeah,
basically.
It's just a void. And so without this moonlight, with this cloud cover, he starts moving in the infantry. And he has them moving in kind of in like different columns. They're not like moving in as a circle to surround the whole thing. They're trying to keep in groups that are harder to spot, but easier to move in, multiple guys.
Yeah.
And they're moving them in like columns, like single file columns. So the guys that really like to fire from the hip and not raise the rifle up have everyone in front of them.
Yeah.
All of those guys do.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I would say that it's a pretty decently smart strategy. The columns, dumbest thing he could have done. Took 1,800 soldiers, divided them into these 4 columns, and then they were positioned. Like you said, the 500 cavalry are outside roaming, basically in a circle just to catch anything that goes. Santa Anna holds 400 plus himself back in reserve to kind of watch what's going on, how this is all going to play out. And then again, I mean, it's smart to hold some guys back because if you see a prone area or you see an area of opportunity, you rush towards that. 5:30 in the morning, 2 columns approach from the northwest to breach this northwest wall and then the north wall. One of them is set up on the east. One of the columns is aimed at this lower fence at the chapel. So not necessarily surrounded, but also, interestingly enough, the way that they're kind of setting these things up is away from that southwest wall. Because what's at the southwest corner?
Davy?
The 18-pounder.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure an 18-pounder is going to do a lot of damage in a column.
Depending on what they're firing, yeah.
Yeah, just the relative ease. You probably want to avoid the biggest gun on the fort.
Yeah.
But the way that it all kind of plays out is so quiet. they're sneaking up. They sneak up. They end up killing 3 sentinels that were asleep.
I think they end up having, there's got to be some type of guys that are just going up there without rifles, just knives.
Yeah.
And there's 3 guys outside the wall, 3 sentries that are supposed to be keeping a lookout, which that's got to be the shittiest fucking, like you're outside the wall and just staring into darkness.
Pitch black. You're using your ears as your only
Every
method of
goddamn
protection.
jackrabbit or animal that snaps a twig or skitters through the brush or anything like that, you're just fucking terrified. Unless you're sleeping.
I was going to say, yeah,
Unless you're
asleep.
sleeping. So these 3 sentries end up getting killed in their sleep. After this happens, shouts of Viva Santa Anna end up going up as these guys are basically on top of the fort and are approaching the walls.
They weren't close enough, though.
No, but
yelling.
I mean, these are really green troops.
Yeah.
They said that the way they positioned them is more of the senior troops were around the outside to keep guys from scattering and running, and then they had some more experienced guys in the back to keep them moving forward.
That's a very Stalin-esque plan to make sure that nobody turns around and runs.
Santa Anna, just Stalin, kind of same diff. Shit ends up popping off. Travis is up. He's yelling at people, get up, give him hell. He ends up saying in Spanish, I don't know the translation, but basically tells the Tejanos and the other like Mexican Texians there, no surrender, boys, and goes out to try to kind of organize the defense as they're under this, full-blown attack. Thanks to some, bad tactics on the side of the Mexican army in Santa Anna, the initial defense actually goes pretty decently. They weren't using cannonballs at this point. They ran out of those pretty quickly. And so they're using basically improvised grape shot. They're putting any type of like metal or rocks into these cannons, and they're basically effectively just giant, an 18-pounder shotgun is with this. And when we say 18-pounder, that's not the size of the cannon, the weight of the cannon.
It's the weight of the projectile.
It's the weight of the projectile. So these things are firing out and just launching basically shrapnel out at these single file line columns to where if you're aimed at the first guy, you're aimed at every guy behind him. And so these are pretty devastating against these Mexican columns as they approach the walls. The guys that are actually able to get shots off, because again, the guys on top of the walls are halfway exposed when they're firing, they end up firing into their own guys half the time because they're firing off the hip. It's dark as fuck too.
Yeah. You're just pointing in a direction where you hear the gunshots firing from and just
Wherever
shooting.
you see the little flash,
Yeah,
and
that's
the little
probably
smoke, or the torches along the top, you're just trying to aim from the hip and aim up a little bit, but you got your buddy who's 2 feet in front of you and you end up doming him or putting one right in his back.
Yeah, not the best strategy.
No.
Also, at the same time, I don't know if there's a strategy against canister shot. Because, like you said, they ran
Spread the fuck out.
even though it's still going to fire and spray.
It does, but at the same time, the spray is it's dictated by essentially the end of the muzzle. So it doesn't necessarily just go out in a huge fan. It goes out, but then as it goes further, it spreads out more. You still have to be in a decent line of sight to be caught by that.
Yeah.
Based on, and think of it this way, going back to how big this thing is, that wall that they're charging, that eastern wall and those other areas, sometimes those cannons, there were 3 cannons, I think, along that longest wall. And that wall was, the 462 feet was the plaza. So you're trying to stay between those areas if you can, but your tactics are like, no, everybody line the fuck up for these cannons.
Single file, we're going to play dominoes. And this can last, but it can only last for so long because, again,
you're already down to firing fucking doorknobs.
Yeah. And if you're firing doorknobs, you're firing door hinges, eventually you're going to have to go collect more of this stuff to fire. So there's going to be some intermittence in the cannon fire.
Which doors do you choose to pick, too?
Interior. Only interior, but none in the barracks. You want the barracks doors still. As this keeps going on, the insurgents ends up getting pushed back once. They circle back around. They come in a second time. They were pushed back a second time. Finally, this third time, they start to get up to the walls, and there becomes a massive issue when you're standing on that high of a wall and people are up against the wall.
All of this attack, get pushed back, attack, get pushed back, attack, happens within 15 minutes. It's not like they're going back to regroup and being like, hold on a second, we need to go ahead and reassess the situation. It's pull back a little bit and then everyone charge the fuck back in.
It seems to be effective. It's effective enough to where I don't know how they do it because it seems nuts to me. But they have ladders that they've built that they then get up to the wall, and then you're just climbing again, single file.
Sir, you've obviously never seen Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
What's scene? Oh, when
they're attacking Helm's Deep, and the orcs are running toward the walls, and they throw the ladders down, and then they just swing them up to the...
Those are orcs. Those aren't Mexican soldiers.
Correct, but there's a strategy to getting a ladder up. You're carrying it, and as you're carrying it, you put the area that's in front. You're carrying it like you would like a table or something like that. You put the front down, and then you just simply... You're not getting up there and then trying to, like, slide it up the wall. You're just swinging it up, and guys are already starting to climb it as quickly as possible.
You're still getting shot at.
No.
It's still a bad scenario.
But you put enough of those things up there, you're going to start getting people over the wall, or... you're going to start getting attention from people that are defending other sections of the wall. They said it got to the point, too, that so many of them were coming up on these ladders. What's the reload time on these rifles?
90 seconds, probably.
I bet some of these guys had it down pretty quickly, but let's go ahead and give them the benefit of saying it's 15 seconds. It's an insanely fast time, but I think some of these guys were pretty quick. Even if it's 15 seconds between shots, how quickly do you think these guys can climb up a ladder? 9-foot, 12-foot ladder. You got two guys up there easily coming over those walls. How many ladders do you have? It's just, at this point, it might be a trickle, but they're getting in there.
Well, the number one thing that it does is it gives the exposure as you have to stand up to try to fire down towards the bottom part of the wall where the ladder is.
Yeah.
And as these dudes stand up, unfortunately... the main one that stands up is Travis, and Travis ends up being dispatched via a bullet to the head as he stands up to start firing down on these Mexicans that are coming up. His slave Joe was standing right next to him and sees Travis drop, starts trying to drag him away, realizes that Travis is dead. He drops his rifle, he drops Travis, and proceeds to walk back into the Alamo, into the room that they're harboring and sheltering the women and children.
The chapel.
It was a room within the chapel.
Oh, okay.
It was like there were multiple rooms in there. One of them was for the soldiers to fall back to, and the other one was for the women. But Joe ends up surviving this whole entire thing. They ask him why he didn't stay out and fight, why he went back in with the women and children. He basically said, whether they won or you won, I was still going to be a slave. So
yeah,
why fight? I'm trying to live.
Here's the deal, too. If they win... they're making it to where slavery is not going to be a thing. Yeah. If they end up winning, it's not going to be a thing here anymore. They're my better option.
Well, and that's saying that Joe knew that that's what this fight was about, too.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm sure there was information that came out that those people would pick up on.
Possibly.
So like you're saying, these defenders who are already exposed halfway up are now having to lean further over, shoot at these guys holding the ladders or trying to get them up. Do you know how many guys are down on the ground just aiming their rifles right up at those guys?
Yeah, hip shot isn't really necessary if you're firing straight up.
You got 10 guys that are all aimed at you, and that's exactly what happened to Travis. I think they said he was firing his shotgun down and just, leaned out a little too far and took one. And that happened at the furthest northern point. Yep. I think they had 3 cannons right there, and he was organizing that defense. But, that's where he ends up going down.
Yeah. Second charge, like we said, repulsed. Third charge, they're making hay. As they get up against the wall, they realize that the wall is so blown to shit and it's built in a certain way that they have these footholds and these crevices. They just start climbing the wall. Fuck the ladders. We can only send columns up in the ladders. We start getting guys climbing up all of a sudden.
That's the unintended genius of just bombarding this thing with cannonballs, is every time one of these balls hits this wall and sinks in enough, it's just creating some place to put your foot and start climbing.
Yeah, and it becomes really effective because they start overrunning the top of that north wall. And as this is happening, there start to be columns that funnel towards that north wall that were working kind of the northeast corners and the like. As soon as they get up over the walls, the Texians retreat down into the courtyard. And when they retreat off of the walls down into the courtyard, they forget to spike the cannons. So now all that artillery that's up there where the Mexicans are climbing over the wall is now falling directly into the hands of the guys
It's
that.
their cannons. I mean, I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
an asshole about that, but they're cannons.
It's a major blunder not to spike those cannons.
You don't have time.
No, and it's probably the last thing you're thinking about. So Mexicans take control of all the artillery that's up there, or all the artillery that's up there. They end up opening a gate. There's more Mexicans that flood in. The Texians continue to fall back into the barracks.
Yeah, well, a few things happen at different kind of intervals during this, and it's all very quickly. Not to jump ahead too much, but this thing is over in an hour.
Yep.
By 6:30, this thing's over. So as they start coming over the northern wall, they have those 3 cannons. They're not really concerned about the cannons right now because they're just trying to get bodies into the fort with their rifles to take out these guys that are inside the fort. I'm trying to remember the name for it. Of course, it's on the page that I forgot. But it's basically a door that allows you to get outside the fort, but it's hidden. It's not like a visible door. They find that. And I would imagine, too, because they held the fort before.
They had to know.
They had to have inside information.
They knew where the trapdoors were.
They get that thing open on the northern side, and so people start coming in that way as well. Those 2 cannons that I was saying were inside the plaza, the courtyard.
Yeah.
Those were aimed at the southern gate, the main gate, to try to protect that. They turned those to start firing at that northern position, which then it's like death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
So you're taking that fire away from guarding the gate, and now you're pointing it the other direction. When that gate, the main point, is breached, you don't have anything to fire at.
Well, if you're firing from up there and they have a better position, it's just going to rain bullets back at you as you're firing these cannons.
Oh, yeah.
You've lost all of the protection of the wall and you're just basically in an elevated position.
There were guys that were they had cannon positions that were kind of along the top of the wall over by the cow pen and the horse pen. Those guys, some of them hopped the wall and tried to run. They got out into the area surrounding the Alamo, took cover in a ditch, were firing at some of the riders and everything. They end up all getting cut down after a little bit of a skirmish. You have guys that were in those horse pens and those horse stalls actually retreating back into like the interior area, like where you would keep the horses
Sleeping
in winter
area.
and everything. And now all of a sudden you're having these guys just get sectioned out. You have guys that are retreating back to just the barracks, one of those buildings that's along the interior wall. If you're looking at it top down, north to south, it would be along the
Northeast.
all the
Middle
buildings are
East?
in the center, basically. The buildings kind of stand between the corrals and then also the plaza. So you have like the barracks and everything like that right there. So you have these buildings that guys are just trying to retreat back into and bar the doors.
Well, that was their initial, if we get breached, we will be falling back into the barracks.
Correct, but you're separating because not everybody can get to the barracks because now you've got the control of the northern part of that plaza in the hands of the Mexican army. If you can't get to the barracks, you're just looking for the next other place to go.
Chapel.
Everyone's kind of heading back for the chapel.
Into the Alamo for sure. The barracks, the people inside the barracks were sending some mixed signals, to say the least, because as they were back into the barracks, luckily the barracks did have installments. You could stick your rifle out, you could fire, you were protected by the walls. Mm-hmm. Some of those guys took that chance to find some sort of a white flag. I don't know where they would have had a white flag or if it was their underwear.
Taking off their shirts, man.
And tying them to the rifles, sticking them out to wave the white flag of surrender. At the same time that those guys are waving the white flag of surrender, there's also guys in the hidey holes that are firing out at the Mexicans. So real mixed signals that are going on here. In order to sort out the mixed signals, the Mexicans would then roll the 18-pounder down to the door, and they would blast open the door.
Mm-hmm.
And as they blasted open the door, they would then stick their rifles in. They would fire
just a volley,
some shots, a volley in there, and then they would all go in and start fighting hand to hand with their sabers, swords, what have you.
And there's multiple barracks that are kind of in a line. So and I'm not sure, I know they used the 18-pounder when they were going against the chapel. I would imagine because the 18-pounder would be harder to move, that they'd just be moving any of those cannons into position. But they were literally going door to door with these cannons. And can you imagine the guys that are in there that are looking out these little peepholes and be like, tell us what they're doing. Jeff, did you spike the cannons up on the wall? He's like, no. It's like, they're wheeling them in front of the doors. And just as they blow open these doors, like you said, barrels go in, a volley of fire, and then they go in with bayonets just to clean up.
Well, and the shot has to throw you off pretty much immediately.
You think that cannonball is stopping at the door?
No.
There's so much chaos in that room, and that cannonball comes flying in there.
And then a volley right after that. And if you're unlucky enough to live through both of those experiences, you're about to get some guys running in with their swords.
You always want to imagine what you would do in that situation. You see that cannon rolling up in front of the door. Do you just go stand behind the door?
Maybe. I'm crapping my pants first, and then I'd probably figure out the most exposed I could get in the room to try to avoid longer fate.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it's you open the door and just stand there in front of the cannon. Maybe that's your way out.
You just leaned against the door. What are you doing?
I'm holding the door up. I'm trying to protect you guys. I'm sacrificing myself for you. As these doors are being breached, the killing continues. Go ahead. And it's just kind of a rout. I feel for these dudes a lot because they did put themselves in these situations voluntarily. They did do it for a cause that's not necessarily an American cause. It was more of a selfish cause. But at the same time, the fate that's befallen them should not be something that anybody has to endure.
No.
It's just insane. The final holdouts, or the final holdout comes in the chapel. That was where Crockett and company were fighting. There's some interesting ideas around Crockett's unceremonious ending. The company's fighting valiantly all the way to their deaths, maybe. And again, we'll talk about that here in a second.
There was, so like as you walk in the main southern gate and everything, the building immediately to your right, which was not within, so you have the plaza, then you have the courtyard in front of the chapel, and then the chapel. So the area where Davy Crockett was that palisade of that wall that connected basically the southern wall to the southernmost wall of the chapel. It was kind of a diagonal fence that went right there. And then there was a courtyard behind them before you got into the chapel.
Okay.
Jim Bowie is in the building immediately to the right, not when you get into that courtyard, but when you get into the plaza. And of course, there's going to be stories that come out. I don't know how anybody could say what happened for sure because no one saw it, but it's more than likely that during this, maybe Jim Bowie did try to get out of bed depending on how bad he had been. He's down with pneumonia and apparently wasn't getting any better since a week earlier, maybe 10 days earlier. And at that point, they say the most likely conclusion is that when they broke in, he probably was armed. He probably did have his knife sitting up with his back against the wall in his bed, but they just popped their barrels in and just shot the fuck out of him.
Well, yeah, I heard a story that it's just rough, but I think it was a couple of the Mexican soldiers were talking about breaching Bowie's room, and they said that he was hiding under his blanket, and they just went in and stabbed him and shot him. He wasn't hiding under a blanket. If he had pneumonia, he was probably out. He was probably unconscious.
If you had had pneumonia for that long.
Yeah. There's a good chance he wasn't hiding. He wasn't scared. I love the thought of him just propped up against the wall with a couple of revolvers and that Bowie knife in case anybody gets closer. But more than likely, he was probably out. I mean, which, good thing. Not a good thing in the grand scheme of things, but
for your legacy
or
anything, but it's the most likely scenario. We've all had, a lot of people have had pneumonia. Imagine if you don't have any medicine for that and you've got it for 10 days.
Yeah, that poor guy just, I don't know.
Probably weak as fuck. They didn't have a lot of rations and everything in there. So after they, end up doing that, the area of the courtyard is still being defended and they're still firing outside the walls. So you have fighting that's taking place from the courtyard out toward the plaza to try to hold that. There's a cannon there. You, I believe, have the cannons that are the 12-pounders that are on the chapel that are also firing outside of that courtyard into the plaza trying to hold them off. You have Davy Crockett and his guys who are facing that palisade, trying to defend it from them coming over that wall. They've got one cannon, but it gets to the point where they run out of ammunition, and it just, you're flipping your rifle over and you're using it and swinging it like a club. It gets down to knife fighting at that point, but that ends up being, I believe, where there's Davy Crockett was one of the ones that was surrendered and executed, or Davy Crockett died fighting. I assume that, like most of these guys, because there weren't a lot of them that were actually executed like after the battle, Davy Crockett pretty much just went out during the battle, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and either way, I mean, it doesn't change his legacy. He fought to the bitter end. Whether it be surrender and execution, I would say maybe it was probably more capture, and they might have realized who they had in the group, because
I don't know if he was famous in those circles.
I think he was probably, yeah, maybe not.
At the same time, think of it this way. We know Davy Crockett after how many years of build up and everything. At that time, he was kind of a folk hero, but he didn't become, if he would have been Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, do you think he would have been King of the Wild Frontier had he not been at the Alamo? Do you think he would have that kind of like folklore to his name?
I think that Wild Frontier probably came at a younger age.
I prefer my Davy Crockett pre-Alamo.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he surrendered. I think Davy Crockett was in there for the long haul. He was going to fight his way out. The executions that he was maybe a part of come kind of after the battle, and we'll jump back, but just a quick fast forward for this. I believe there were 6 men that were lined up, and they were brought to Santa Anna. Santa Anna said, "No quarter. I told you we take no prisoners. Kill them."
Yeah, why are they here? Why are you bringing them to me?
And the group of soldiers that brought him in refused to kill him. They were refusing Santa Anna's orders, and a few of Santa Anna's lead guys walked in and killed them. And it was kind of starting to sow the seeds within the Mexican army that maybe it wasn't all Santa Anna being in charge anymore.
Yeah, there was an instance where I believe it was actually before they launched this night attack, this night raid, where he went through the soldiers that were there and basically went to their commanders like, does anyone have family that's from this area? Does anybody have anything that would potentially cause their loyalty to waver or anything like that? Anybody that could potentially be fighting against a family member or anything was actually pulled off, and I think put like as part of the reserve force.
Mm-hmm. Which you're worried about everything at that point in time. What's 2 or 3 guys on your side fighting to try to save them or try to keep somebody alive? But at the same time, there's that. Dictators always kind of seem to have that same mental state of, I have to watch out for anybody that could be coming after me.
Well, especially considering that he got to power kind of doing something similar and everything. If you're doing it, you're probably afraid of somebody else doing it to you.
Yeah, he's no stranger to a coup. The fighting inside the chapel was tough. It was really just another bloodbath. It wasn't necessarily the exact same thing that happened in the barracks, but again,
they used the 18-pounder.
Yeah, it was the 18-pounder this time to blow through that door, and after the volley goes in, there's hand-to-hand fighting again inside the chapel.
I think they had said that they had actually bored or drilled holes out of the chapel so they could still actually point their rifles out and fire and everything. But at the same time, that's where you're penned in.
Yeah, and you're too close. You're too close to make those be effective, really.
Mm-hmm. So that's where you're also getting like bayonet fighting and where it gets like really fucking brutal.
Yeah, any kind of close quarters combat, for as brutal as it sounds, getting laid out by the scatter shot from the cannon, hand-to-hand's always going to be so much worse. There was a room, I believe it was off to the west side inside the chapel where the women and children were. And again, there weren't 20, 30 of them in there. There was a handful of them. But at the same time, if you know that this is happening, get him out of the fort.
There was a guy that was in charge. He was I want to say requisitions officer, but that's not it. He was like the artillery captain or something like that. And there was still a powder store in the chapel. He tried to take a torch and go and detonate it, which would have also killed all the women and children in there as well. But they said that he was killed and the torch landed like a few feet away from the powder barrels.
Yeah, that could have ended up a lot different. That could have ended up really, really bad it still ended up really, really bad, but really bad for everybody involved. There was only one case, and again, we're hearing this from the Mexican side, really, and then the few survivors and the women that got out. There was one case of a child who had pulled a blanket up over his head and was running as the door was open to see the women and children, and they fired upon them and killed the kid. A bad outcome at that point in time, but again, 60 minutes.
Dark as fuck. You're just firing at shit that moves at that point. And then maybe when you finally hear the screams of women, you're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And after this is all over, it's not like they finally killed the last Texian that was inside. We're like, yes, victory. We have vanquished everybody. There's still fighting going on. There's still friendly fire going on because you're in such a compact area.
Buildings and everything.
It comes to the point to where Santa Anna has to roll in himself and start yelling at these guys to stop. Santa Anna's not even stopping the chaos that's going on. He had to call back to the buglers and have them trumpet out.
It's that battle bloodlust.
Retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to get so fired up to go in and do this that it's not just like it wears off once it happens. The Mexican army would then stay inside the fort and basically walk around, and anybody that moved would then get stabbed by the bayonet again.
Yeah, there was 15 minutes of essentially cleanup duty where they were stabbing and shooting at bodies. And during the battle, this thing takes between 60 and like 90 minutes for all of this to go down. There was a point in time where they were able to get up and take down whatever flag, wasn't the American flag, up there, and then raise the Mexican flag. I think 4 of the Mexican soldiers got killed doing it. But again, that's always a symbolic thing to be like, hey, we hold the fort. Casualty numbers are going to be off. What we can say with pretty much certainty is we know roughly within probably 20 to 40 people how many people died at the Alamo. As far as like the people on the Texian side, probably somewhere between 180 to 220.
Yeah, that number seems pretty correct. I think sort of the right number for me. It ranges all the way up. And of course, Texas, this is the Texan number, like all the way up to, they said about 1,500. It didn't wipe out that many people. They didn't wipe out half of the invading
force. Couldn't put 1,500 people really in that fort.
No. My guess is it was probably between 400 and 600, just based upon the riflery skills and then the buckshot cannons, basically, that were being fired.
Oh, you're talking about the numbers of
Mexicans.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, again, the Texas number's right around 1,500, potentially, that they did kill. I think probably 400 to 600 makes sense, because 400 to 600 is still not a little bit.
No.
That's a lot of soldiers that are going out and dying.
Still a 3-to-1 parity that you're causing,
But at the same time...
That's also, like, killed, right? There was a lot more wounded as well.
And the stupid thing that Santa Anna didn't do was, in his rush to get there, he didn't bring any doctors with him. And I don't know if they found any doctors in Bejar, San Antonio, but he didn't have the adequate medical supplies to help out anybody that was wounded.
They didn't bring the Sandbar Medical Center that saved Jim Bowie's life,
Yep. Yeah, they could have used Bowie's boys on that one. But it kind of changes a lot of things during this revolution. It sounds like a loss. And even afterwards, I mean, the Mexican soldiers were taken and they were buried in a cemetery. The Texians were stacked in 2 funeral pyres, basically line of bodies, line of wood, line of bodies, line of wood, and they were lit on fire. I don't really take that as disrespect. I almost take that as more respectful than just to leave somebody laying out to rot, which, again, they couldn't do because they were taking control of the fort. There's a lot of other disrespectful ways to get rid of them.
Yeah. No, I agree. Used to be an honor in Viking culture.
Very true, yeah. There was one exception, and it was a man named Gregorio Esparza. He was the brother of a soldier in Santa Anna's army that basically his brother asked for permission for proper Catholic burial. I don't know why Santa Anna got a soft spot at this point in time. He's like, yeah, sure, take him.
There was also another dude that had been a defector that was part of the Texian side.
Oh, yeah.
That was inside the chapel. And he was like, no, I'm not fighting with them. They captured me. And they
were POW.
Yeah, and they were like, oh, okay, cool. All right, yeah, you're cool then, I guess. So that guy got out of it too. But there was also years later that they came back after the Texas Revolution, went back to the Alamo, and there were still, I mean, the ashes had been buried over and everything. Someone went and symbolically like filled a casket with the ashes that they were able to discover, put on the tombstone or put on the casket that it was like Crockett, Bowie, and Travis.
Mm-hmm.
Put on there, and I can't remember where that ended up being sent, but
it went back to the San Fernando Cathedral. I think the one at the bell tower.
But like we kind of said at the beginning of the podcast, for me, the comparison to this would be from a propaganda standpoint and from a rallying standpoint, it would be like Pearl Harbor, because everyone's heard the phrase "Remember the Alamo," and that was pretty much what became the official rallying cry. So much, in fact, that it actually was the Republic of Texas's state motto, was "Remember the Alamo."
Really?
Yep.
Wow. The unsung heroes, I guess you would call it, for the Texian side. When this story gets told, maybe it was just my own ignorance that I always assumed that this was just the people that were fighting for the Republic to try to be that way. I completely neglected to even think that there would be any Tejano people there that were fighting on that side. But there was a lot of Tejanos that were fighting on the side of the Republic.
Yeah.
So this wasn't just a push in from the United States. There were people that had been born in Texas that probably were fighting for a little bit more moral reasons to try to hold this land, because they were fighting against a dictator in lands that they were born into.
It's complicated when you phrase it like that, because those people feel like that is their homeland. But then again, you have the people coming in from the United States that are coming in there to basically just create their own country as insurgents in another country. It doesn't change it being a tragedy that there was a loss of life and everything like that. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Both things can be true at the same time. It sucks that these people were put in a position where they weren't going to make it out alive. They wouldn't have been in that position if they weren't invading another country. So, I mean, you can't just be like, oh, they were fighting for their independence or anything like that. They weren't being, what am I looking for? Subjugated.
Yeah, it's a good word for it, I think.
They weren't being prosecuted. They weren't being, why can't I think of the fucking word? Like when someone comes in, like what happened in like Germany and everything like that, they weren't being rounded up or anything like that. They were there because they were like, hey, we're born here. This is our area. But then at the same time, not looking at it from the other perspective of being like, oh, fuck, we're in their country, aren't we?
Yeah. And we're not a pro-dictator podcast. This has nothing to do with Santa Anna. In my eyes, as far as this goes, Santa Anna could have been anybody else. It's just kind of the fact that it happened.
It could have been a parliament in Mexico, and they're like, no, they're invading our it was Santa Anna, which adds the flavor of nobody was right here. Mm-hmm. There are levels of saying, I can understand one side, again, country A, country B. Country A invades country B. I can't really, and the reason for slavery and the taxes with the side of, this is where I grew up, this is my homeland, I want to protect it. But then at the same time to say, yeah, man, if you're going to live there, though, you've followed the rules of another country, you kind of got to accept that if you're moving there. Yeah. You don't just get to try to create a revolt and overthrow it because you don't like them changing something.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can understand why this would be a great rallying cry for the people of Texas. I have my own kind of non-feelings about it, and it is a very historical event, because what it leads to is kind of, it's Pearl Harbor for the Texas Revolution. Mm-hmm. It's them screaming, remember the Alamo at San Jacinto, when they go ahead and end up fixing the Santa Anna problem.
Yeah.
Santa Anna, and again, we'll talk about it during the rest of the Texas Revolution episode when we do it. Santa Anna comes into power like 11 more times. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of always a thorn in the Republic of Texas's side, but he can't hold power long enough to really do anything. So clearly, after Texas gets out and they become their own republic, Mexico doesn't go well.
No.
Like, it doesn't just fall under dictatorial rule and everything turns out fine.
And at the same time, it doesn't go into like, well, you guys got us, I guess. I guess you guys are the Republic of Texas now. We just have to leave you alone. Because not that many years later, very few, in fact, something happens and all of a sudden Texas is looking over its shoulder being like, hey, United States, we could use some help here. And they're like, oh, yeah, why don't you guys just join us and become another state? And they're like, I guess we kind of fucking have to, because if we don't, Mexico's just going to fucking take us over.
Ton of angry Mexicans, ton of angry Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
You got your land. Unfortunately, you didn't get your land clean.
Yeah.
Like, there's still problems within what's going on.
Which is the American way.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
Yeah.
Very true. Interestingly enough, the layout of the Alamo with the courtyard and everything has kind of been commercialized.
Yeah, really all that exists from what you see in images is the chapel, at least the facade of the chapel. I don't know how deep back, far back it goes for where it's being preserved. And then a little bit of the plaza and a little bit of like one of the horse or the cow pens.
Is there any barracks that are still up or no?
I don't know if any buildings are, but if they maybe have a section of the plaza because the buildings were built on the wall that separated the pens and the plaza, there may still be some existing buildings, but that's also a whole nother can of worms. Cause then you're like, man, this was your guys's this was the place where won you guys the Texas Revolution. I mean, San Jacinto was the battle, but really this is where it kicked off. And then you guys are just kind of like, I guess we just tear down a bunch of it. We don't really preserve it until 1883 when the state of Texas purchases the chapel.
Yeah, and you have to think at that point in time, you're getting the Mexican-American War, you're getting the Civil War, all that stuff is happening in Texas too.
We're fighting more wars.
Yeah, of course there's more wars coming. So you're probably not too worried about keeping a hold of the Alamo and keeping it in tip-top shape because you're busy fighting some more.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the fact that the state of Texas did decide to come in and purchase it from the Catholic Church, which of course Catholic Church still wets their beak on this land, that changed hands no less than 3 times potentially between everything that happened in 100 years. But they finally do decide to hold it. It's been I guess not remodeled,
preserved in what ways it can.
Looks like a great building. I would love to go see San Antonio. I think there's a lot of fun stuff around there just with kind of the area that it is around Johnson's properties and having the Alamo there.
I think it would probably shock us how small it is.
Yeah, very much so.
You got anything else?
No. Yeah, I guess I do have a little bit more. Again, like we started out with, this episode's not meant to be disrespectful. People have different beliefs. If you're living in Texas and you hear this, you're like, fuck those guys. I can't say that I blame you. I'm sorry if you feel that way. We didn't mean for it to be this way. It just kind of comes out of left field when you hear about something for most of your life, and then you kind of get the full story, and it doesn't really line up. So you tend to look for things that maybe aren't as glamorous because you don't know if the glamorous is truthful or not.
This story has always been presented as only the silver lining. You don't get to see all the other stuff. It's only like, well, this is what happened, and it was important because of this, and we were the good guys and all that kind of stuff. And you're just kind of like, just like fucking every topic we've done, man, it's people. People are complicated. People aren't necessarily good and evil. You do have people on those ends of the spectrum, but at the same time, it's all just about the individual perception and what, the people that are on each side kind of believe. And that's kind of what this is depending on what side of it you're on, you're going to have a much different view of this series of events. Yeah.
We didn't grow up with it as much. We heard about it in school, but it wasn't something that we heard about every year all the time. Our state motto wasn't remember the Alamo. So it probably means something different to us than it does in Texas. I am glad that we do have these regional stories because it does kind of still make, for as much of a melting pot as the United States are, there are still certain events that happen in areas that people can hold on to as their pride in their area.
Yeah.
And it does create a more diverse United States to have these different things that happen in different cities and different states, which is such a cool thing to know that even though we are the United States, there's still different points in history that mean different things to different areas.
Yeah. All right. Now, do you have anything else?
No, I hope that people held on long enough to hear that. But if you didn't, I don't blame you.
I'm sure they did. But again, hopefully we've kind of established at this point when we talk about these topics that unless there is a clear-cut, complete douchebag on the other side of this conversation, we try to kind of play it down the middle and look at it as dispassionately as we can and not let our country of origin dictate how we feel about the actual facts, these historical events. So hopefully that's what you guys got out of this, and hopefully you stayed interested during the 3-hour episode.
We did it again.
We did it again. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.